look, I said, I take your point. Let's say Trump is an existential threat. Let's say that he's a unique threat among all Republican candidates. My concern is that every year, because we all vote for blue no matter who, because most Democrats vote blue no matter who, or most left leaning people do, the message that gets sent out is that Democrats don't have a bar. You can go as low as you want, as close to the Democratic Party as you, Republican Party as you want, and there's a ratchet to the right effect. And Republicans know that they can keep being more and more extreme. And so I want you to explain to me what you predict to be the stopping point at which we're no longer saying this new Republican is the worst that has ever happened. This new Republican is the worst that has ever happened. Tell me you're not going to be saying the same thing about Ron DeSantis or Vivek Ramaswamy or whatever other person comes down the pike. And he was unable, in my subjective view, to respond credibly to that claim. So if somebody could tell me strategically what the stopping point is going to be of making this argument of the lesser of two evils, I would be open to the idea that, okay, this is the last one. Donald Trump, fine. He tried to steal the election. Fine. That is a new line that he has crossed. But absent an acknowledgement that we are creating our own destiny by lowering the bar in these ways, I'm not comfortable coming out and criticizing anybody who no longer wants to be complicit in that kind of a system that's enabled the Democratic Party to not have a primary, treat Marianne Williamson badly as they've treated her,
Mhm.
treat Bernie Sanders as badly as they treated him, and openly come out and say they don't have to hold a free, fair election. The DNC argued that in court, you know?
So let me explain a little bit of my position. I think that'll help respond to some of what you said there. And I'm also curious to dig in a little bit more to your analysis of how the Biden administration has actually been in reality. So last election in 2020, I did live in a swing state. I lived in Virginia, still live in Virginia, registered in Virginia. And it did not feel good to vote for Joe Biden,
Mhm.
but I decided to vote for Joe Biden, which is something I said publicly at the time. But I said something very similar to you, which is like, listen, this was not easy for me. If you, wherever you live, swing state, not swing state, et cetera, you do whatever you analyze is the right thing to do. And the reason that I voted for him primarily at that time, even though I thought he had an atrocious record in the Senate, even though, complicit in the Iraq war, complicit in bad trade deals, complicit, like terrible things on crime, all that stuff, right? The primary reason I voted for him was because of the National Labor Relations Board and because labor politics and building out union power in this country, to me, is one of the most important goals and something that I think we all share and leftists generally believe. Now, in retrospect, not only do I feel good about that vote, he's actually surprised me. Now, I've got all kinds of issues, right? On the National Labor Relations Board, though, specifically, they just issued a ruling which could be a complete game changer for unions. And just to explain to people a little bit, basically, in the past, bosses could union bust with impunity, no accountability. Now, the process going forward is completely changed. If bosses are caught union busting, then that's it. There's no more election. It's canceled. They
Mhm.
have to recognize the union and start bargaining with them. That's the biggest shift in labor relations we've had in our lifetime. So that's why at this point, I'm not only, it's likely to, I'm a Marianne supporter as well, but we can all see the most likely outcome is it's going to be Trump versus Biden. Not only would I say that protecting the Biden National Labor Relations Board isn't important enough for me to vote for Joe Biden, but it is important enough that I would actively encourage, but I'm not going to shame them for whatever they decide to do, but I would actively encourage people who are in a swing state to vote for Joe Biden, if for no other reason than to protect that board.
So I think that's a perfectly defensible position. And I had this conversation on my podcast in the last episode, and there were people who would characterize that position as, I mean, you've heard the thing, you've been on the internet, being too credulous about Biden or, being too comfortable in one's own position in life and not needing enough change and being happy with the status quo. People will say things like that. I think actually that if your priority, if you believe the path to meaningful change is going to primarily come through a kind of, I don't say this dismissively, but a kind of labor incrementalism, meaning there are meaningful labor gains that happen, but are not the type of which would radically transform the system the way that some people want to happen in a shorter term. And the way that some people might argue Bernie Sanders represented his movement as as the goal of being,
Mhm.
then that's a defensible position. But I have to hold space for the reality that there are people for whom, even as significant as those labor gains are, it's simply insufficient. And what they see when they look at the trajectory of the last 50, 60 years of Democratic Party politics, when they read Listen Liberal and see the longer game, the Democratic Party making a concerted choice to back away from labor in a way that has gone on for decades and isn't necessarily turning around as a consequence of Joe Biden having some good NLRB appointments.
So
So
go
let me
ahead,
actually
you
let me
respond, and then I
actually
want to jump into it.
So, number one, I don't think that in like massively increasing union density, I actually don't see that as incremental change. I mean, if you look at the chart of the decline in the middle class and the decline of union
No,
density, you'd be hard pressed to find
I
a more
understand,
significant
Crystal.
factor.
But I made these arguments as well.
But the other piece is, I feel like those same people who are right about the Democratic Party, they were right, right about the analysis in Listen Liberal, right about the fact that you had, this free trade bipartisan consensus, and in large part a union busting bipartisan consensus, also don't acknowledge that there actually has been a notable shift in the Biden administration. Now, my big issue with the Biden administration, I mean, there's a million of them, right? On foreign policy, I've got problems. But my biggest issue economically with the Biden administration is the way they've allowed the pandemic relief, the short-term pandemic relief programs to fall away and leave a lot of ordinary Americans in a more precarious financial position now than they were at the beginning of the administration. And that's not nothing. But when I look at the long term, when I look at the fact that, listen, with the Inflation Reduction Act, with the CHIPS Act, with infrastructure investment, you're talking about industrial policy in a way that would have been completely unheard of in the Clinton-Obama era. When you look at not just the NLRB, which I said is like the core for me, but also his antitrust appointments and the fact they're really trying to reverse decades of neoliberal attack on any sort of trust busting, I feel like none of those improvements that have made Biden on that front way better than Obama, way better than Clinton, I just feel like there's no willingness to acknowledge any of that whatsoever.
I don't think the issue is acknowledging it. It's how much it matters to you, how weighty that is to you, and how much you see those kind of call them meaningful improvements as really core to the nature of the project that you're on. And I think that what some people are frustrated by is that this went from feeling like, in both left media and left politics, a bigger revolutionary project that was going to the core of our capitalist system and wanting to radically change the way that human lives are valued, what we consider to be the nature of our social safety net, what we believe to be the nature of what we consider to be human rights. And they wanted to join a movement that validated what many of us felt intrinsically, emotionally for most of our lives, that something in the milk very much wasn't clean. And Bernie came along and articulated that it was legitimate for us to be asking for something more. And so at this point, it does feel as though there has been a kind of a bait and switch. It's not that what you're describing isn't true or legitimate. And I said this on my podcast. If your priorities are what you have kind of articulated your priorities as being, I think it's a perfectly legitimate argument. But I have to hold space for the fact that for many people, it simply is inadequate.
Wait, can I respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me jump in here. So my issue is that many people on the left are, I would say, dishonestly refusing to acknowledge any good things that were done. We could all on the left list, like, here's the 57 things we hate that Biden did. But when something good happens, I'm the only one talking about it, and then I get accused of being a DNC shill. Now, I'm not like, look, I'm not blind. I think in order to be intellectually honest, you have to look at, here's the good things that happen, here's the bad thing that happened. I'm going to give them all to you, and then you could judge how much you value each and which one you weigh more and how that factors into your like voting analysis. But I was like the poster boy back in the day, or people viewed me this way, as like, he's the purity tester. He's like the main purity tester guy. And I didn't vote for Biden in 2020 because I didn't think he would pass my purity test. Now, at the time, people could go back and watch the video. My purity test was super fucking lenient. It was like, if I'm convinced you're going to do like 2 or 3 of the things that I value highly, then I would vote for you. Because I know it's basically down to just the Democrat and the Republican, no matter how much we want to wish the Green Party or libertarians want to wish the Libertarian Party into existence. And so when I look at the record, again, I could list all the bad things, but you just mentioned the NLRB raising overtime pay, or you mentioned the thing where, they automatically recognize the union if the bosses try to bust it up. There's also the overtime pay rule, where now it's not $33,000, it's about $55,000 a year, where now you get overtime pay. That's a huge, huge change. Student loan debt reduction, and even Biden coming back after the Supreme Court tried to slap it down, and he said, no, I'm going to try to do it through the Higher Education Act now. There's little things we could go after. Oh, the interest rate. Yes, that's bad. I agree with you on that. But we got to recognize that is, all things considered, a step in the right direction. Pulling out of Afghanistan, he actually had the balls to do it, even when the media was shitting on him relentlessly. And I didn't see anybody on the left coming into his defense at that point.
I saw a lot of people.
I was like the only fucking one. It was like me and Matt Iglesias.
I definitely defended him.
Okay, well then it's like 3 people. I didn't, and all these. Oh, I'm so anti-war. He pulls out of Afghanistan, and it gets messy, because that's what happens when you pull out of wars. And all of a sudden, oh my God, it's the
I thought that
the
was
end of the
actually a
world.
good moment for the left. I saw a lot of consensus. Good on you, because we almost resented and kind of were enjoying the extent to which he was getting, dogpiled by the mainstream media, and we were the only ones defending him. So I would quibble with that a little bit. But
I didn't see much defending him. I really didn't.
Kyle, what people are responding to, if I can offer this, is not the idea that you are accurately describing advancements, good things that Joe Biden is doing. I think you could also say Obama did some good things.
No, Biden is way better than Obama, not even close.
That's not the point I'm making.
Okay.
It's not that one is better than the other. You could also sit here and say Obama did good things. Now, the way you bristled at me saying that, I could say, oh, why won't you just acknowledge that Obama did good things? The same way that you're saying that leftists won't acknowledge, they bristle when you acknowledge that Biden did good things. And it's because we have different standards and we're making different kinds of comparisons.
But that's not my issue, because they're not even acknowledging the good things, is my point. I have a list of 47 things here, and I've heard nobody talk about any of them.
But let me get to the core of this point. The reason that people are frustrated with that kind of analysis is because it's been used for so long by liberals to justify why people shouldn't be asking for more. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing. But if you bring up something like student debt, when the consensus of all of the student debt experts that I've talked to on my podcast, people from the Debt Collective, the Asher Taylors of the world, the legal experts I've brought on, is that there was a path toward doing this, to canceling all student debt, that would not have been stymied by the Supreme Court. The same authority that Donald Trump used to enact the student debt moratorium, which has been ongoing until beginning of this month for the last 3 years, was the same authority that he could have canceled all student debt with a stroke of a pen. He chose not to do that because he decided to means test the program. He circulated those documents. I got one in my inbox last August, I believe it was, to see if you qualify for student debt. It was a very easy form. But when he did that, that started the clock for people to be able to challenge it in court, which what 6 states did, 2 of them were successful, and now here we are today. Not only did he decline to do the unstoppable mechanism to actually cancel all student debt, he additionally chose to use a legal authority, which when many legal experts said was the most vulnerable one. So you're now saying,
no.
He could have used the Higher Education Act.
He did. He did.
He could have done that in the first instance.
But he didn't, and now he tried it again through the Higher Education Act. The idea that it's a conspiracy, he doesn't want to actually cancel it. No, he appealed the case like 4 or 5 times.
Kyle,
and then at the end of it, when the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that, he said, fuck you, I can. And he did the Higher Education Act. That's exactly what we wanted him to do. Then he does it, and people go, oh, that's not good enough. And it's like, that's ridiculous.
There, Kyle, what we wanted him to do was first and foremost, just cancel the student debt.
I expected him to do nothing on student debt. This is the point I'm trying to get across to you, is that I expected nothing from Biden, and he did way more than I expected. Let's be honest about that.
It's not about your expectations. We have different expectations.
Of course I'm going to talk about it through my expectations. I'm me.
But I want to pivot this conversation a little bit, because what we really have is a tactical disagreement. We could quibble about student loan debt. We could quibble about all kinds of aspects of the Biden administration. All of us would like him to do more. There's no doubt about that. But hold on a second. Our political aims are ultimately very similar. But I do think the student loan debt example is instructive, because it shows what has been effective in terms of securing real gains versus what has been ineffective. Jill Stein running in 2016, I don't think she was a spoiler, but the Democratic Party thinks she was a spoiler. They put that out to the public. So in the theory of change, where a third party would force all of this revolutionary change on the Democratic Party, that should have worked. But instead, it served to allow the Democratic Party to basically demonize and dismiss third-party efforts, and then they prop up Joe Biden. So that definitely didn't work. However, the fact that Joe Biden had to be on a primary debate stage versus Bernie and Marianne and a whole lot of Elizabeth Warren, a whole lot of other people who were pushing him on student loan debt cancellation, forced him into a position of doing something when he 100% would have done nothing otherwise. And we can see that now because, the fact that they've basically like blocked any sort of real democratic process within the Democratic primary has made it possible for him to literally promise nothing for this next term thus far. So you can see how the third party effort was not successful in bringing about whatever revolutionary change people want to see. And the process that Bernie engaged in and that Marianne Williamson is engaging in now was far more effective in actually delivering results. And that's what I'm focused on.
So, first of all, you, I think, are both fundamentally dramatically overestimating and overstating and giving way too much credit in the second that you can make your labor point, the student debt point. Absolutely not. Joe Biden promised and coerced people to the polls by saying he was going to cancel at least $10,000 of everybody's student loan debt, and moreover, cancel all student loan debt for graduates of HBCUs. And he went down to Georgia, a state that he not only needed to win for the presidency, but needed to win for the Senate, and where there are three of the major HBCUs in the United States of America, made that promise, and people knocked doors and turned people out to the polls on the basis of that promise, which he immediately stopped talking about the second he got elected and reneged upon. He also he knew the authority that he had to cancel all student debt. And I know because all of these student debt advocates have been talking about how they were directly liaising with his office and communicating these points, and they chose to ignore them and do a plan that he knew could be obstructed. You can say it's not a conspiracy theory, that's conspiratorial thinking, but it's either a conspiracy or he's an idiot. Those are the options. And I'm not especially comfortable in validating either of those things. Now, you were saying that you were looking through the prism of your own perspective.
No, I was saying I expected nothing from him, like we all expected nothing from him.
Absolutely not. The people that he promised.
I expected nothing from him.
Wait a minute.
I expected nothing of Joe Biden. He was the guy who brought us NAFTA. He's the guy who brought us the Iraq War. He's the guy who wrote the Patriot Act, who wrote the crime bill. I expected nothing of him.
When a presidential candidate makes a promise to people and lies to them in order to get them to go to the polls, I believe it's my job as a member of independent media to make it clear so that people don't fall for those kinds of mistakes going forward. People, if Biden wants to run as I'm a milquetoast incrementalist who's just better than Trump, he can feel free to do that all day and night, and then he would have lived up to the expectations that he set for himself in the context of a primary campaign.
He did run as a milquetoast.
He promised to cancel all student debt for every graduate of an HBCU and $10,000 to $20,000 of student debt for people who earn less than $125,000 a year. Now, that might not matter to you, and I defend you guys against claims that, you don't care about this stuff because, you're.
This is my take from the Brianna Joy Gray, Crystal, and Kyle Ball debate. These white people are dangerous. And what I mean by that is they are willing to sell you out for money and fame because democracy has little to do with what they are saying. These people know as well as I do. We have all the same information at the tip of our fingertips and thumbs to see the truth, and yet they choose to lie to you. I mean, I expected Biden to starve us out on the first day. We all starving on the 10th day. I mean, this passed my expectations. Yeah, of course we are hungry and still dying, but this is the best we can get, and it's 100 times better than Republicans. To see the shit that the people is going through, the evictions all across America, people are starving, and you saying this is the best that we can do? That is a fucking lie. And to sit here in front of our faces and lie telling us, well, I honestly think Trump is going to get us closer to World War III. We are already in World War III. Have you not been paying attention to the weapons and the money we've been sending to Taiwan, Ukraine? Have you not been paying attention to the coups that we are funding across the world? Have you not been paying attention? Or is it that you are paid to be dumb? Because none of that shit makes sense. And to sit here and lie to the people, that is some evil shit. These people will continue to get you killed. These people will continue to starve out your family. These people will continue to not give you the education that you need in order to fight correctly because it keeps their pockets full. Why are you so afraid of teaching the truth, Kyle? Why are you so afraid of teaching the truth? Because there's no money to be made in the truth. There's really no money to be made on the far left. You know the audience that you have to pander to keep that millionaire status? These people are dangerous. You shouldn't listen to them. They're going to keep you in the loop. They're going to literally drive you insane by doing the same things over and over and over without a result. Cal is a failure. Just as Democrats failed. Every strategy he put together failed. All those people he put in office failed us. And he is a failure. And like I said before, you cannot listen to a loser about winning a damn thing. About winning a damn thing.
There we go. Welcome to a special edition of a brand new podcast, actually. So let me throw that up there. Welcome to. Oops, I got my other TV on. Let me turn that down. Sorry, everybody. Normally Saturdays is called Shoot the Shit Saturdays, and it's real laid back and it's just chill. But today we're premiering a new show idea. Now, initially it was called Conversations with Leftists, but I feel like we need to broaden that. Bring in independents, bring in even if conservatives want to participate in these conversations, even Trump supporters. We tried to get Trump supporters and conservatives and Joe Biden supporters at the last minute, and it was just too hard to get. We weren't able to get, but hopefully moving forward, we're able to add those perspectives to this conversation. Okay, but I decided at the last minute to change the name of this brand new podcast because we're opening it up not just to the left. So we're going to call this the political spectrum because it's more than just the left. We have independent thinkers, and we kind of want to get away left, right. I mean, we talk about getting away from those things all the time. So why not start now? Why not start now with getting away from those things? So let me say it the right way. Welcome to the political spectrum. I'm your host for today. I'm CJ. And we have a fantastic group of people. I mean, I'm so amazed I was able to put this together in such a short amount of time. And the Marianne, for example, a Marianne Williamson supporter we have was just recently added, in the last 2 hours or so. So just happy to have everybody here. So I'll bring everybody in at the same time, and then I'll introduce you. So let me bring everybody in. So we have Brooke, we have Case, and I want to say it the right way. Is it Day or Die?
You got it right, Day.
Oh man, Day's in the building.
Yeah.
And then we have Chuck. You've seen Chuck. Now, Chuck is the one who spurred this idea the last time. And then we have Hector also. And Hector hasn't been on in over a year on RBN. And welcome back, Hector. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to go to each of you one at a time. Of course, ladies first. We're going to start with Brooke. Let me take this video down so everybody can see us better. And just start with, most of our audience may already know you, most of you. So if you would just start with your name And then who are you supporting in the primary? Let's start with that as an introduction before we get into some questions. So say your name and who you are supporting in the primary, if anybody. And we'll start with Brooke, then we'll go to Hector, then Chuck.
I'm Brooke Hines, and I'm supporting RFK in the primary, but I hope he jumps over to independent so that he's not in the primary.
And we're going to explore that concept or that idea of RFK running independent later on today. So we will be talking about that for you to further kind of give details on that. So I think I said Hector, then Chuck, and then we'll go to Day. Go ahead.
What up? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
It's Hector Oseguera coming to you from New Jersey. And currently, I'm not really supporting anyone in the primary. You know, we'll see if that changes depending on what the candidates put forward. But at this point, my vote is up for grabs.
Wow. So we have a real undecided primary voter here. So great to have you, Hector. Chuck, and then Day, and then we'll round it out with Case. Go ahead.
I'm third party Dr. West all day, every day, and I think that might answer your question. Chuck Modiano. Yes, Chuck Modiano, DC area. And first of all, thank you for having me. I know we had a discussion last week, which spurred some of this. We had a great discussion. I think this dialogue is really needed, never needed as much as today, particularly with Dr. Weston in the mix. So it's an honor to be on this panel with everybody here, whether we agree, whether we disagree, just to have some rich dialogue.
Absolutely. And Day and Case.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Day. I am currently supporting Marianne Williamson in the primary. Super excited to be here, so I thank y'all for having me.
Awesome. And Case, rounding it out with you, Case.
Yeah, I just feel so honored to be with my family. Like, I feel like I have a connection to everybody here. Brooke, Hector, I met Modi in person just the other day. Day's my man, and of course CJ. So I'm just so happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to what fruit can come from these kind of conversations. Right now, I am for Cornel West, but I do plan to vote in the Democratic primary. Probably as of right now, leaning towards Marianne Williamson, but I did see a tweet that Nina had that was mysterious, so it's going to be interesting.
she's been kind of dragging that for a few weeks now, if not a couple of months. That she has something big.
Yeah. So I'm kind of undecided in the Democratic primary, but I'm definitely playing as of like if I could buy a Cornel West shirt right now, I would buy it. So that's where I'm.
Yeah. I hear you. So, just to set what this is about, and Day and Case, I would say Case several times explicitly expressed in the DM that I'm here for solutions. This is not about argument, and I want to set that tone. This is not that. This is not an argument stream. I'm not necessarily a debate bro for debates. That's more Nick's territory. So that's just not what we're going to be doing here. But how this came about was we were I had Chuck on to talk about Cop City, the RICO charges that just came out with Cop City. But in our conversation, we end up talking about something else a lot longer. One of which was Rage Against the War Machine. And that is what spurred the idea of, wow, we should have, because that conversation was so well, this should be something that's more regular where different perspectives are coming to talk about that. And as far as the Rage Against the War Machine rally, Chuck was one of them who was against, one of the leftists who was against. And if you remember during that time, there was a big old sort of divide between attending or not attending or participating and not participating. And Chuck fell on the side of not participating. RBN had the same critiques that Chuck in the Black Agenda Report had of the rally, but it was still our position to attend. And Sabby, our member Sabby, did attend the rally. So it was a great conversation, Chuck. And I felt like, trying to design a show where it's not a one-off, where we can kind of do this on a regular basis, whether it's every other week or once a month. to kind of build this at least dialogue. I can't say this is going to lead anywhere, but at least we can say, you know what, we talk about it, didn't really see a viable way of partnering on this issue or that issue, but at least we took a shot at having the dialogue. So that is the point of today's show. And then I reached out to Case, and then Case is the one that pretty much got everybody else, or he at least made the suggestion for everybody else except for Brooke. I think Brooke, I just asked in the DM. So, all right. So now that we've kind of said, you know, what to expect, what I want to do is, well, let me do this. So here's the graphic initially that we're gonna have for the show, and you know, like I said, we're gonna change it up and go a different way. So now today's graphic is this one, and so what I want to do is, let me put it up, is talk about these four people on the screen first, on this graphic first, before we get into some of the other sort of questions. And we will have to tap into that faith interview. It'll be interesting to see people from different perspectives, all sort of giving their perspective on one video. But it's kind of was perfect planning, because what this conversation that Brie, Kyle, and Crystal has is a conversation about how do we coalition. These are our ideas. This is your idea, and Crystal give their idea about Joe Biden. Bree's giving her idea about Cornel West, and then they're having a meeting of the mind. So that's sort of like what we want to do today. But the first thing we're going to do is go around and talk about what is your opinion of each candidate that I'm going to put up here on the screen. We're going to start with Joe Biden. So if everybody just kind of in a 30-second to a minute, what is your assessment of Joe Biden? How would you characterize his policies? How would you characterize the effectiveness of his presidency thus far? And we're going to start backwards this time. So we'll go Case, then Dave, then Chuck. So Case, and this is to kind of calibrate. We're going to go through all the candidates. So this will kind of give the audience a window into each of our perspectives politically by giving our opinions on each candidate. So we'll start with Joe Biden, and I'll give it to you, Case, and then we'll go to Dave, Chuck, and then Hector.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of Biden. I didn't vote for him last time. I don't plan to vote for him this time. I plan to vote for Cornel West. And I watched the whole interview with Kyle and Brie. I actually put up a couple clips. But I see their argument, and I can't give credit for having certain things. And in my clips, there are certain times that I clipped out the head of the FTC. She's a very good person that is against monopolies, and she's doing some good work. And that's a Biden appointed person. The MLRB, is helping out with labor. But as far as touching people so that they can feel your presence, so that they can feel that you are helping them, Bidenomics is a joke. And we saw that I have people in my family that's like, hey, we got more under Trump because we got more checks, we got more money. And I can't argue with that under Biden, right? And that's something that touched everybody. So I'm going to keep it short that I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of ruffles can be, what can happen in the primary to try to force some kind of value. And that's why I was a proponent of force the debate, because I think that if Biden could debate Marianne or RFK or both, I would want to see or both, and this would never happen, but Cornel West as well. I think that this could be value when you call Biden out on a lot of the mess, Ukraine, giving all this money to Ukraine, his response to East Palestine, and Hawaii. I think there's value there, but I talked enough. Okay, keep it moving. Hope you got my opinion of that.
Yeah, completely. And go ahead, Day, and then Chuck.
Sure.
Your ideas on who Joe Biden is. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, Biden's not my type of Democrat. I did vote for him in 2020. At that time, my state is kind of in this weird transition to being more solidly blue. So my feelings on it now are very different. But I will say this: for me in 2020, one of my gripes with Trump in office is that I believe he sucked the oxygen out of the room to actually talk about anything substantive. And unfortunately, it didn't matter if I was talking to a Democrat, Republican, Independent, etc. Everything oriented around Trump. And so removing him from office for me was important so we could actually start having conversations about things that I think matter, that I knew he wasn't going to pass either. As far as Biden, I think he's a hodgepodge. I think there are certain moments that I don't really credit him. I think it's just what he inherited from office that, yeah, he did some things like the child tax credit, things that he let expire. Then, of course, student debt is a thing for me, and that pissed me off. But then there are some things like the National Labor Board, et cetera. I don't have a high expectation of him. I still feel like he's a corporatist through and through, but he has shown that occasionally he'll trip into the right thing. So nothing to shout about, but I can acknowledge where he's done well.
Me? Yes. So, listen, I have always said Trump's bigotry comes straight out of his mouth and Biden's bigotry comes straight out of his budget. And I'll keep repeating that because if you look at his budget, what do we know? Endless military spending, endless wars, not just Ukraine. It's going to go there. It's going to go somewhere, even more than Congress asks. And that can go in other places, right? Domestically. We already talked about East Palestine, Flint, and all these other places. We talk about the ICE budget. He ran against Trump. Trump was this guy who was racist, and we talk about this ICE budget. He raised the ICE budget, I think, by over $100 million. He kept Trump's Title 42 in place. This very same policy created by Trump and Stephen Miller kept a lot of policies in place. And then you talk about policing. I covered the George Floyd uprising in D.C. every day out there. It was amazing. And stuff was being done. Schools were getting rid of police officers. We were having games in different places. Colorado was passing qualified immunity. The people did that. Legislators didn't do that. So what happens? Joe Biden, the sedative to the movement, comes back and goes to the State of the Union last year and says, fund the police 3 times and asks for 100,000 more police officers on the street, which was originally a Josh Hawley amendment. And what he does is he does a reenactment of what he did back in '88, that when the right wing was really into mass incarceration, he said, we're going to take that issue away. How are we going to take that issue away? We're going to go to the right of them and be harder on prisons and be harder and mass incarcerate more black people. And he's doing the same thing today with policing. It's a page out of his playbook. So we're seeing a repeat. And I was told that we could push Biden left. I was told that was ancient history. I was told he wouldn't repeat that. And he is doing every single thing that we said we should be worried about he could repeat it. So I'm no fan of Biden at all. And I could have mentioned many other things. I didn't mention Palestinians and Saudi Arabia and all of that stuff and domestic policies that others have mentioned.
Yeah, we'll get into more later, but thank you for everybody keeping it to that minute because it's a lot. It's a lot you can say about Joe Biden, so I get it. So let's go to Hector and then Brooke. Go ahead.
So I'm definitely not a fan of Joe Biden. I will admit that I did vote for him in 2020, but for me, it was a vote against Trump, not a vote for Joe Biden. And I will say that I took Joe Biden at face value for what he is. He's a corporate Democrat, and so I expected him to behave like that. And so I will say that his record is a mixed bag. He has done a lot of negative and horrific and, shall we say, par for the course things for a corporate Democrat, but there have been some policies that I would agree with, exiting out of Afghanistan, the NLRB. He has an antitrust regime that is much different from what you would get out of a Republican. But that is not to say that even though he's done some good things, I wouldn't say that he's done enough to earn the vote of somebody like me who held their nose and voted for him in 2020, I think he still has a long way to go to sort of get people like me to even consider voting for him. So I'm definitely not a fan, and I think that he's got a long way to go before, he, unfortunately, because of the system we have, he's probably going to be the Democratic nominee if he lives to see that day. But, that does not mean that he's going to have an easy ride to the general. And I think that he has a lot to do to gain the support that he would need to be reelected. So that's where I stand on Joe Biden.
Thank you, Hector. And Brooke, and then I'll give my assessment, and then we're on to the next one. Go ahead, Brooke.
So for me, Joe Biden is, I don't think he's going to make it either. I've had 3 elders in my family go through dementia, and I'm seeing it progress even worse in him. I think we're going to see Kamala rolled out to take over in some way. I don't know when, but I think we're starting to hear that being talked about. They're floating the idea. Even Newsom said that that he wouldn't jump in the race because it's Kamala's to jump into. So that's very interesting to me. And then the other thing, so it's the corruption with Biden for me, and it's always been that with Biden for me. The senator from MBMA or MBNA, his relationships with banks, and now his relationships with Ukraine when he was the point person for Ukraine, and then doing all this stuff with his son on the side. All of that are the same, like that kind of corruption is the same reasons we were supposed to usher Trump out, and somehow it's okay for Biden. And I can't sit with that. I'm a real big, like, if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander kind of person.
Thank you, Brooke. And it sounds like everybody has at least moderate criticism to very massive criticism of Joe Biden, and I'm no different. I guess I would lean on the more massive side. He's all terrible to me. Everything from his roots as being friendly with segregationists to his, like, a lot of people don't know he was pretty terrible in the 70s and 80s. Like, he was, like, just as a regular senator without seniority, he was terrible in a lot of things he said. You can find a lot of clips. But he said he lied. He was a known liar, plagiarized. That's why he had to drop out of the presidency before. So he's all bad for me. And how I would describe him, like, all of his bad way outweighs anything that I would classify as a good thing. I'm trying to think of some other things, but I can't think of any. But let's move on to the next one. Now that we're getting into more people that some of us who are here support, I would just say let's make sure, even if you have critiques, be respectful in the critique that you have. Let's not say call him son of a bitch or anything like that. Could be offensive that to somebody who is supporting somebody, not in this context, not in a context where we're trying to talk and come to common ground. If you're, on your own podcast, of course, because I would do the same thing. You really go hard at some of these people, but in this context, we do want to keep it respectful. So let's first go with RFK, and we're gonna start with Brooke, the RFK supporter. So tell us your assessment of RFK.
So
I'm
RFK,
sorry, Brooke,
yeah. So RFK to me represents the place in history where the U.S. was ruptured the worst. The 60s with the assassinations, JFK, RFK, MLK, X. I mean, and the list keeps going. This is, to me, when the intelligence agencies went full in and got full control. And I'm so freaked out about what happened with Trump and Russiagate and the control that they have, that what I've prioritized is the promise of someone who can come in with some balls and get rid of these people and just, clean house, scatter them to the four winds. They got to go. We can't have a democracy at home and an empire abroad. They're treating us like an empire at home. And that's what's really starting to freak some people out. Now, the other thing that is really big on my radar is this idea that he has to heal the divide. And I believe we have a divide within the left that I keep seeing on Crystal and Kyle and, on some of these other shows. I keep seeing it get worse. I keep seeing people dig in. And I'm not here to, I just want to underscore, I'm not here to dig in and, this is the only way. I think if we're going to heal the divide in the country at large, we had to be able to heal the divide too within ourselves. Because the left, after Bernie, kind of, I don't know if it was on purpose or not. It sometimes feels like it was, but we had a lot of power, and then all of a sudden we had none. And I would like to switch that up. And I think there's a lot of power right here with us in this group.
That is spot on, and in your analysis of what sort of the left needs to do, in my opinion. But I do want to clarify. So what I'm hearing you say about RFK is that you feel like he's speaking the most to the deep state. He is speaking the most to that sort of perspective, which the deep state is the root of most of what's going wrong. For most people who believe that the deep state is the number one issue, they are connected or the root to most of what's happening wrong in the U.S. So I do take that point. Let's go to Hector, then Chuck. Hector, what's your assessment of RFK, and then Chuck?
So I hear him talk about a lot of issues that I think are important when he talks about the economic elites. I think that he's spot on when he talks about BlackRock and Vanguard and the people who really control our economy. I do think he has a clear message. My problem with RFK, and I think this is going to go similar for Marianne Williamson, is that you're entering into a rigged system. And so, how can you turn around to your supporters and ask them to support you when you're playing in a game that essentially has been rigged against you before you even jumped into it? And so while I think his message is very powerful and he is speaking to a lot of the issues that people have on their minds and is speaking to a lot of the rot that exists within our political system, I'm not sure that his approach is going to result in actually taking care of those issues, because he's in the DNC primary, which, you have Simone Sanders saying as loud as she can every time she's on TV, there will be no Democratic primary. And I'm pretty sure that that's the official position of the DNC, is that there will not be a Democratic primary. And so I find it hard to support somebody who at the outset, is very, very unlikely to be successful.
Great point. And thank you, Hector. And let's move on to Chuck, and then Day, and then Case.
Yeah, sometimes when you hear a politician say something you haven't heard before, you have a visceral positive reaction. The first time I heard Tulsi Gabbard talk about the coups in Latin America, I was pumping my fist. I never heard that before. Oh my goodness. And then I started checking under the hood and saying, oh, she's very pro-war against Muslims. She's very pro-drones. She's pro-torture and against Palestinians. And then you check on the hood, you're like, okay, what you felt and what you heard wasn't really the whole story. And for me, sometimes when I hear RFK Jr. talking about the military-industrial complex, it's like, I pump my fist. And then I hear he kind of flips very quickly on Palestinians. I cover Palestine rallies in D.C. And not just flips, but had, I would argue, the most vicious right-wing rhetoric, even more than Trump, on a Trump level, when it's Palestine. And what changed? Well, Rabbi Shmuley and some other people got with him. And all of a sudden, almost overnight, he went with standing with Roger Waters to standing with Rabbi Shmuley. It happened overnight. So I have a huge problem. For me, it's a disqualifier, but I want to get to another layer of it. If once the money came in and you were pressured so badly that you would flip your position almost overnight on Palestine, now I have to question everything else you say correctly about the military-industrial complex. And when that money and those pressures come in, and if you were president, why don't I think you would flip on all of that stuff too?
Gotcha. Oh, that was a lot, but you're good at fitting a lot in a small space. Probably because you're a sports writer, you got to know how to do that. But let's go to Day and then Case. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I respect Brooke's position that, you know, in these current times, she's prioritized, and I hope I'm not misstating you, prioritize like the deep state and things like that. And I actually do think that not just RFK's rhetoric, but his, you know, biography, given, you know, what's happened to his family members, does give him a lot of credence when it comes to that issue specifically. And I do think he speaks well to diagnosing what the problem is. I think for me and RFK, I just don't always agree with his prescription to fix it. You know, he is more of a openly a free market capitalist type of person, and that tends to be the core of a lot of his analysis when it comes to how to fix problems like healthcare, climate, etc. And I don't really share that. So I think for me, it's nothing. I don't feel, you know, heavy towards him in any direction. I think it's important for his voice to be in the conversation, and I think it's good to have a very clear contrast between Biden, someone like him, and someone like Marianne. I don't view them as the same type of Democrats, and so, yeah, you know, keeping it nice. I think he's opened my eyes to more of the deep state conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Case.
Yeah, so I believe RFK when he says that he knows in the different agencies how to fix them. He knows the personnel, he knows who to fire, who to let go, things of that nature, because as an environmental lawyer, he's sued them many, many times and have gone through the different agencies and even read emails and know how they work. So I believe him on that. My difference of opinion or my criticism comes, he's mentioning in his interview that his father was able to get as far as he did because he ran as if he didn't plan to win, RFK. And I don't believe he's running that way. I believe he's running in a political way. We talked about his views on Palestine. I think his view on Medicare for all, where he wouldn't even fight for Medicare for all, and he already acquiesced to doing a public option that is a red flag or puts you down a notch, and that's why I probably as of right now lean more towards Marianne in that area. And but the last thing I want to say is one thing that I'm impressed is I've been thinking about this for a while, and I've thought about the Force to Debate hashtag and trying to get that going. And I said, you know what? If around the time of the first RNC debate, if the DNC hasn't forced a debate, then I'm going to start focusing my pressure away from Biden and the DNC to Marianne Williamson and RFK to start debating each other or to start playing hardball. And one of the things that I've noticed, and Brie mentioned this on the show, and I clipped it also on the Kyle Kalinske show, that she said that he needs to come out and say, if they're not going to debate me, they're forcing my hand. They're forcing my hand to do something. Right now, he's testing the waters. He's saying they're going to make me do something. I don't know what that is yet, but they're going to make me do something. But we know where that's leading. If you don't debate me, I'm running third party. So you can either debate me now or debate me later. And I like where he's going with that. So that's where I end on that.
I like it.
Oh, and then as far as mine, RFK, how do I feel it? He's just he has it's like like what so many other candidates. I mean, he's good on certain things, like his critique of Ukraine and a lot of the sort of deep state. I do like that, but as everybody's sort of critique of him, his stance on Israel is a deal breaker for me. Israel is one of those areas where, to me, you can't get that wrong. Israel is an easy one. But I do think he serves a purpose, and I do like that he's running. And if I were a Democrat, and I'm not voting in a primary, so I don't have a primary person that I'm supporting, I would pick him over Marianne Williamson because of the Ukraine stuff and the deep state stuff and some of the things, that reason why people like him. But again, neither one of them I'm supporting. So I want to make sure we get, because Day has a hard out of 5 more minutes. So we're going to start with Day and make sure, because this is the whole reason why we had you on the show, to get your assessment and your opinion, and Marianne Williamson supporter of Marianne Williamson. So let's move to Marianne Williamson, and let's give Day the opportunity to speak about his analysis of Marianne Williamson, and then we'll go to Case, and then go back around to Chuck and around the table. So let's start with Dave.
Okay, thank you. And I did work things out so my heart out can be 3 if there's still conversation that needs to be had. But
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So for me personally, I will say that my lens for right now, what I prioritize as far as policy issues, is a true transformation of our domestic agenda. I am very open about that. It's not that I don't think foreign policy is not important. I do have opinions on that. And there are areas that I disagree with Marianne, and I'm open about that without hesitation. However, I personally feel that I find it very difficult for me to get people to care as much about the foreign policy issues that I care about, when all they can think about is the fact that I'm starving, but you want me to feed somebody else. I'm suffering, but you want me to care more about somebody else. Now, of course, within that, there is a spectrum of how you're handling foreign policy. I'm not saying let's go invade Mexico just because we're feeding at home. I'm not saying let's say, keep funding the Iron Dome because we're now feeding at home. And I do think that as far as Marianne Williamson, I will address how I stand on some of the things that I know people probably have disagreements on, which is fine. As far as the foreign policy situation, I think when it comes to Israel-Palestine, I think that's a very important issue, but I like to make the distinction between RFK, and from how I've seen him talk about it, and Marianne, for example, is that while, some people just are against a 2-state solution or, that type of funding or the project of Israel, I do at least respect at where we are in the consensus of what we're trying to build on that issue, which I still think needs a lot of work to get to where it should be. I at least respect the idea of trying to stipulate aid that goes to Israel, and more importantly, agreeing to fund Palestine, which in my opinion is automatically going to get AIPAC triggered, because you're not even allowed to pretend as if act as if the Palestinians exist. And so that to me is important. As far as domestic agenda, I think that I view her as a visionary type leader. So for me, of course, I know she's not going to sit down and be writing these policies, but I do believe her view for what she wants and bringing the people that she wants to bring in is very critical. For me, an economic bill of rights was something that of course, FDR, then Martin Luther King championed as well. And that's important to me. And no other candidate has really brought it forth the way that I felt it should be brought forth. I'm big on children. And her decision, I have a lot of friends from overseas, and something they teach me a lot about is how they front load education, and they put a lot of resources into children up until the age of 10, and of course, moving forward. And that's something that I know she prioritizes. And my last piece would be the whole healthcare plan, because while we talk about universal healthcare, which of course is important to me, that conversation is late. Like, it's not even a debate anymore that should we have single payer healthcare. But what I think is under discussed in her plan is an emphasis on preventative care. And so those are like the things that I think I would prioritize domestically, and why I support Marianne.
I think the way we're going about doing this, it helps to say what you're prioritizing first, because the person you're talking to. So this is one thing I'm picking up, that going forward, all the people who are left, who are thinking about, let's see how we move forward, that is a tactic we should use when we talk. This is what I prioritize. because it helps us to say, okay, you're not saying you're against Israel. You just don't have it as a priority, or you have something else as a priority. It helps the other person who doesn't prioritize that to go, okay, at least you're not saying you think it's just this. You just have a different priority. So I do think that saying that or saying what you prioritize is key in any discussion that you're having with somebody who has a difference of opinion in this case. So let's go back up to Case, and then we'll go down to Chuck.
So my political love language is a healthy issues page. And Marianne, boy, does she have a healthy issues page. That's one of my things. I know they know this about me, that when I find a candidate, the first thing I do is go to their website. And what I just saw the other day, I clipped that a candidate said that consultants would tell them, and the candidate might be passionate about certain policies, but consultants, and Hector might know about this as somebody who's ran in the past, they'll tell you, oh, we want you to put the least amount of issues, because the more issues you have, the more your opponent can call you out on something, or the more a constituent might look at something and say, oh, no, I don't like that, so I'm not voting for that person. While your opponent would have, literally, you can't tell the difference if they're Republican or Democrat, and they might get the vote. So that's the one of the things I really like about Marianne's page, and how she puts up front all the policies. Now, something that I want to see, and it kind of goes piggyback off of what I said before. I want to see her play hardball more. Like, at this point, she's done a lot of different interviews, and now I want to see her come out and say, hey, you know, the DNC has been doing me dirty, and if they don't want to debate, then they're forcing my hand. Then I'm going to have to do a dirty break, and I'm going to have to go third party. And they're not going to want that, because according to them, they're going to say that, oh, Biden's going to automatically lose. So I wanted to see her play hardball. We see Trump did that effortlessly. He did it naturally, where he said, hey, if they don't do me right, then, hey, I might go third party. He did that already. So I want to see that kind of hardball going on.
Marianne Williamson is interesting to me, because I'm really with a lot of her domestic policies. I like her domestic agenda, and yet I don't like her foreign policy. And I'm not going to get into the details, but I'll just say I'm an internationalist, right? Like Dr. West is. And what an internationalist just generally means is you see human life as equal no matter where it is, Palestinian, Yemen, Somalian. We see it that way. And if you really get down to it, in not just America, but every country, most people see human life as more important where it happens. So if an American soldier dies, we hear about it forever, but we don't hear about the numbers of the others. Iraq War, for instance, right? So that's going to govern me. And that's my problem area with her, without getting into it. But what I like is her domestic agenda. And I do think if we can force those debates, I do think there's value. I'd probably vote for her. I think there's value. Why? Because she speaks about reparations. She was the first candidate to speak about reparations on a public stage. So the media person in me says, well, 77% of Black Americans support reparations, but only 18% of white people support reparations. How are we going to educate white people? Well, Black people have been talking about it forever. And you got a leading presidential voice who could talk about reparations, slow, peel the onion with white people. Even that crazy Dave Rubin guy, I saw her sit down and talk real slow with him, like hold his hand. And dude, I couldn't do that. I'd punch David Rubin in the face. But I think you need some people who could have that dialogue slowly to do that. So if we're going to make headway on reparations, I'd like to see her on a Democratic debate stage for no other reason but that, and to articulate that in a nation of white people. She'll lose, but we can have that conversation in public, because white people need to be educated on what they owe from slavery, from mass incarceration, and from Jim Crow.
And Hector.
Yes, so I mean, similar to what a lot have been said here, I do agree with Marianne Williamson on a lot of her policies. When I ran in 2020, I had her support and her endorsement. And so I have a lot of positive feelings towards her. You know, where I run into issues is that we had a saying on my campaign is that the rookies talk ideas and the pros talk logistics, right? What I prioritize is a vision for how does this thing get across the finish line. The things that I would want to see is a strong ground game. I would want to see a logistical operation that makes me believe that she's contending in a system where she believes she could be the victor. And like I said, with RFK is going to be the same critique for Marianne, is that in the DNC system right now, I don't have the faith that I can cast my vote for her thinking that she's actually going to be the Democratic nominee. And getting over that hurdle is what makes it difficult for me in evaluating both her and RFK, is that I want to see a ground game. I want to see logistics. I want to see an operation that makes me say, this is a serious operation and you actually are trying to be elected president or actually be the DNC nominee.
That is great analysis. And let's go to Brooke and then I'll give mine. Go ahead, Brooke.
Okay, so I totally agree with what Hector just said. I wish all of these candidates would get out of the Democratic primary and run as independents. They have until October to make that, to land on something, and it'd be great. Marianne Williamson, I have nothing but warm feelings for her. Especially, I don't know if you remember this, but when her mic was open during an interview and she was crestfallen because she was being treated so bad in the media. And she was like, I've been left my whole life. Why are they treating me like this? I think that's how a lot of us feel, like we've been left behind in the party. And so I think she has some fire in her belly because of that. But I totally agree with what Hector says. There's a logistics issue that I would really like to see from everyone. I mean, I want everybody to take this totally seriously. Have offices open in every state. Have ground game everywhere. Take all the polling seriously and fight. It's time to see people fight for us. I think that Marianne's got it in her, and she's definitely got the domestic policy part of it. And I think we need her in the race. I think we need her voice in the race for sure.
And then, this is my turn. Marianne Williamson, there's a couple of things with Marianne Williamson. First, the launching of her campaign was really jumbled by her friends in media. I think there's just been so many sort of public relations bad decisions from staff to that, to me, to sort of like what Hector and somebody else was saying about logistics, is just, to me, it says that this is not a campaign that thinks seriously that we're running a campaign. That's the feeling that I get. And then on policy, I'm just not a person. I don't believe her. I don't feel convictions from her. I don't, in particular with Medicare for All, I feel like that's just a position she's come on because she had so much backlash from the left on that position. She just sort of changed. But the biggest, the reason why I could never support a Marianne Williamson is the Ukraine war. And this is my main critique of why I can't support her. And that is, we can't have the biggest thing happening in this moment, which is the Ukraine war, and you are on the side of the people that's on the wrong side. That is just something I can't. It's not something that I can look past. It'd be like having a candidate during 1845, right before the abolition of slavery, who's good on everything except slavery. Like, I just can't. I can't do that. Like, I want Medicare for all, I want this, I want that. Slavery, I can't. like that's the most. This is the most important issue right now is Ukraine. So because like somebody said, like I think you said, Dave, she's better than RFK on Israel. And that's something I didn't know in the beginning, but clearly RFK has made this hard pivot because of some sort of backlash that he got for praising the rock star George. Who am I thinking of?
Roger Waters.
Roger Waters. I said George. His real name is George. That's why I was thinking of George. But Roger Waters. Yes. So yeah, but to kind of sum up the ones we've talked about so far, Joe Biden, RFK, and Marianne Williamson, I do think that RFK and Marianne Williamson will be served better if they were running third party. Just think if they were running third party, it would be two things. One, you're already in the general election. You're already going to be there. And then two, the mainstream media is forced to talk about you because the polling is so tight. It's so tight. You get what I mean? That they have to talk about Cornel West because the polling is so tight. So I think it was a fatal flaw by RFK and Marianne Williamson to run within the Democratic Party. For that reason, I do think they will be talked about in this specific cycle more if they were running third party because of the tight margins. Now let's go to Dr. West. This is one I feel like a lot of people are gonna, I love Dr. West. So maybe instead of talking about what you like of Dr. West, if I think we're all we like Dr. West, but let's talk about what are some of your critiques of a Dr. West campaign. Now, if you're not one of the people who say, no, I'm one of the people who's on board with Dr. West is great, then say, yeah, no, I'm not one of those people. I don't think Dr. West is great. And, just say that. So let's start with Brooke, then we'll go to Hector. What say you about Dr. West?
I'm a fangirl of Dr. West. Ever since I read his book in, I think it was 2004, about Democracy Matters. I just have thought the world of him. Excuse me. What is a critique? I think the Green Party maybe for me might be the strongest critique that I can muster on Cornel West. If I had to come up, just that the Green Party, has their own issues. I don't know if he's a great fit with the Green Party, to be honest. And if I had to come up with a secondary critique, it'd be that he's a person from universities and from the academy, and he doesn't have the muscle memory of how you go to DC, how you make things happen, how you put the thumb screws to people. What I would really love is Cornel West and someone like RFK coming together where they've got those two pieces, where they've got the piece where you can go out and you can get the people together and bring them up the mountain with you. That's Cornel. And then you've got the guy who can go into all of these agencies that have been captured and clean them out, litigate the fuck out of them, it's like get rid of them. And so it's really hard for me to say anything critical about Cornel. I mean, for sure, it'd have to be about the logistics of his race and the Green Party, which I'm not that familiar with, and it just doesn't seem like a good fit for me.
Thank you. And Hector, and then Chuck, then Day. And I'm sorry, Day, you had to leave right about now, or you still had a little time? No,
if I can just get this
take off.
Then.
Yeah, if you want to say what you want to say, and then we can send you off, sir. Go ahead.
Sure. So yeah, of course, I love Dr. West. I think he is a visionary leader. I view him very akin to Marianne in many ways, which is why I would happily vote for him in the general if it was Biden, Trump, and Cornel. I would say my critiques of Cornel are probably similar to something that Case brought up. I do like to see, I believe he speaks eloquently. I love great orators. But when I go to his website, I see 3 issues and I see about a paragraph for each, similar to how I felt about RFK. So it's kind of like, yes, it's great to be able to speak well, but then I want to see if you have a plan. Even if people disagree with Marianne's, points or how she would go about certain things, at least you know what they are. With a Cornel West or an RFK Jr., I feel like I'm taking a chance because I don't really know how they think about it in totality. I would say that, and logistically, because I see an argument, CJ, with what you're saying about if they were running as third party, the media attention that they would get for sure. I do think where I have the issue of jumping to the third party ship in terms of winning is that I said, if you're really serious about winning, I think that due to the structural barriers that both parties have put into play, it would make winning a lot harder for either of them. But getting that 5%, I definitely think is feasible with like a Cornel West or someone with that popularity. My only concern is, given the fact that both parties agree on dismantling and destroying third parties, is there any safeguards to prevent them from saying, oh, well, you got the 5%, but what happened was we had the legislation that said you really need 10%. And so I don't, as much as I would like to see, a plurality of different options, I don't see them taking that lightly. That's what I'll say. If the Green Party gets the 5 that they desperately need, I don't see them taking that, which is why I agree with their decision to run in the Dem Party, but that brings its own issues. So, but I really do thank y'all. This was awesome. I can't wait to watch the rest of this later on. You all are amazing people. Thank you for making me think.
And we're gonna be doing this regularly, so hopefully you enjoyed it enough to where you're willing to participate. And we'll talk in the DM and schedule a day that's good for everybody. Hopefully we can kind of do this semi-regularly. It doesn't have to be every week, but maybe every other week or twice a month or once a month or whatever we decide in the DM. But thank you, Dave, for coming, and I'll put you in the back and you can take off whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Y'all be blessed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we're gonna go back to Hector and Sabby in the chat. I'll read her super chat before we go to Hector. FYI, DNC has already changed the rules in Iowa, New Hampshire, Georgia. RFK and Marianne need at least 80% to get delegates. Otherwise, their delegates go to Joe Biden. That is insane. That's insane. I think that's what RFK was speaking to. And go ahead, Hector. You're going to chime in. Go ahead, Hector. And, you can go ahead and talk about it.
I've seen that interview with RFK, and he's supposed to meet with the DNC to talk about these rules because I mean, like everyone else, I love Cornel West. It's going to be very difficult for me to come up with a critique. And I'll say this: I've never voted third party in my life, and this is the first time I'm considering voting for a third party candidate. And the specific reason is because I don't think that the Democratic Party should feel entitled to my vote. They should not feel safe that I'm going to vote for their candidate. And I want them to change their behavior and do things that makes them seem worthy enough to get my vote. So my critique of Cornel West candidacy is going to be along those lines, that if I do choose to go into that booth and vote for Cornel West, it's not because I believe that he's going to be elected president. It's because it's going to be a message to the DNC. You did not earn my vote, and this is my way of sending you the message that your candidate was not good enough for me, is I'm going to vote for somebody else. And so if that's my critique, is that no matter how good it could get for Cornel West, I don't see November 2024 Dr. Cornel West is elected president. As much as that would make me happy, and as much as I would love to see that, we have structural barriers, we have psychological barriers, we have the media that acts as a barrier that's not going to allow a man like Cornel West to actually be elected through a third party system. And so if I choose to vote for him, it's going to be because I want to tell the DNC, you did not earn my vote. And so that puts pressures on other people. If your priority in voting is to get somebody elected, I cannot legitimately say that I would be voting for Cornel West to elect him president. It would be more as more of a fuck you to the Democratic Party more than anything else.
And Hector, maybe it's because I haven't talked to you about these topics in over a year. But if I'm thinking back muscle memory, you sound different than you sounded in that conversation. So could you address that? Have you been more radicalized in a particular way? Because you sound different than that. Because for people that didn't know, you came on the show and it was a friendly debate, but it was a debate where we were talking about the progressive strategy. I was against it, and you were saying, "What do you mean?" So, but today I'm telling you, you sound fed up. Maybe that's a better word. You sound fed up than you did before. Could you speak on that? Go ahead.
No, definitely. I'll elaborate on that. And I would say definitely, I wouldn't say that I've radicalized any more or less. What I would say is that the Democratic Party is going to be accountable to the pressures that it gets. And one of those pressures is from the people. So if I just say, okay, I'm just going to vote for Joe Biden, that no matter what happens, they don't feel any pressure to actually change their behavior, to give up policies that are going to be more palatable to a larger group of people. So they shouldn't feel that my vote is in the bag. Now, I live in New Jersey, which is a totally blue state. And so if I vote for Cornel West, if I vote for Marianne Williamson, if I vote for Donald Trump, it's not going to change the result of my state. If I were in a swing state, maybe I would have a little bit of a different calculus to make on that. But at the end of the day, I live in a blue state where Joe Biden is almost guaranteed to carry the state. So I don't feel that if I vote for Cornel West or if I vote for anybody else, that there's going to be this backlash or this uproar over my personal decision. Now, I am fed up with what we've seen from the Democratic Party over the past 4 years. There have been a lot of broken promises. And at the end of the day, I just think it's about applying pressure from the public to tell these people, like, if you want to hold on to, I believe that politicians only care about two things, money and power. If you take these things away from them, that's the only thing they're going to respond to. So if I threaten Joe Biden with, well, I'm going to take your power away by not voting for you, that maybe makes that politician say to himself, oh, well, maybe I got to throw them some more bones. Maybe I do got to go for a Medicare for all instead of a public option. Maybe I am going to try to cancel student loan debt. Not that I actually believe that someone like Joe Biden is going to do any of these things, but if we don't apply the pressure, he's definitely not going to do them. I don't think Joe Biden would have ever been expected to reclassify cannabis out of Schedule 1. That's something I campaigned on as a far left candidate, not something that I would have expected a Democratic establishment candidate to ever do. But it's one of those things that I would put in the good column. So without the pressure from the public, you're not going to get even those crumbs. So let's make it more than crumbs. So I'm withholding my power by saying you're not entitled to my vote.
Yeah.
So that is a great explanation, and it does explain the slightly different sort of tone and rhetoric that you have. So we're talking Dr. Cornel West. We're going to Chuck. I believe Chuck is next, right?
Perfect segue, because what I want to say builds off of what Hector said. Agree with a lot of his analysis. Agree with what Savvy just said. He didn't need to win. So let me reframe it a little bit, because I don't see it as just a fuck you vote. I don't just see it as a protest vote. I don't believe Dr. West can win because he's going against Empire. I'm going to be honest with you. Even if today a poll came out that 70% of the Democrats liked him, all of the big pharma, the military-industrial complex, these billionaires might get together just to destroy this man. You know what I mean? So I don't think he'll likely win. But I do believe he could tangibly move forward movements. Barry Goldwater lost in a landslide in 1964 and actually impacted the next 50 years of racist Southern strategy thinking and put it in motion that others adopted, like Nixon and Reagan and others beyond him. Something that maybe even Bernie Sanders, had he went scorched earth and lost and was the nominee, the movement could go past a candidate. So when I hear somebody like Dr. West talking about Free Palestine and puts that on the stage, can he advance Palestinian liberation past his life? Should organizers run with it? We have a situation in Atlanta where he's talking about the only candidate talking about Stop Cop City. And I'm of the belief, and I want others to consider this, that cop cities and what's going on in Atlanta is the most important domestic issue of our time. And I didn't understand that until I went down and spoke to the activists there. That if they build this $90 million facility, $60 million, which becomes from private donors, you are going to see cop cities in every single city across America, and there's an international component. If it's not stopped there, we're going to have an irreversible, dystopian, militarized police state that can't be stopped. So when we talk about right-wing fascism, that is the Trump. What about bipartisan fascism? What about Brian Kemp and the folks in Atlanta leadership getting together? I consider that the highest form of fascism right now, and we can't vote our way out of that. We have to stop that. So if Dr. West is talking about it, and that's an active movement right now, and he can help move that forward to actually legitimately help stop Cop City, then that's movement politics, and that is something that could be tangible, along with many other issues he could advance. And that's far more than a protest vote.
I hear you. I don't like the description of a protest vote myself, but you know, it is what it is. But
Hector didn't say that. I said it because others say it. You know.
Yeah. Of course. Just in general, when people say protest vote, it's like in a democracy, that's not a thing. You just vote for who you want. Like it's not a protest vote. But Case, did I? I don't think I went to you yet for Cornel West. So let's go to Case, and then I'll give my thoughts. Go ahead, Case.
So just to put my cards on the table, I voted Green Party since Cynthia McKinney in 2008 from then on. So I do plan to vote for Cornel West again. But one of the critiques, or not even a huge critique, a strategy point that I would love to see him make. Bernie Sanders championed Medicare for all. He put it on the map. As much as people don't like AOC, she championed Green New Deal. It came out of Green Party, but she championed it and put it on the map. One thing I would like to see Cornel do is, and I stole this from Brie, she talked about him really talking about ranked choice voting. I would love to see him put that at the forefront of his campaign and put that on the map, similar to what Chuck was saying about movements. Like, let's have that be at the front. And it does two things. It shames the Democrats, because Democrats have been actively stifling ranked choice voting in many states. And he can shame them when they say, oh, you're going to spoil the election, you're going to do these things. He's going to say, no, I want ranked choice voting, which is an anti-fascist bill. It's going to stop fascism, right? We want to stop fascism. Let's have ranked choice voting. And then it's also going to help people vote for him, I think. And so I would love to see him do that. That's not really a critique, but that's a strategy point that I think that he can really take that to the general.
Absolutely. And for me, we all know we all kind of like or love, whichever word you want to use, Cornel West. My critique is the critique you've already seen, sort of, and if you watch Nick and CJ and we do interviews with him, it's just, we are sort of to the left of him, so I'm always saying to be more aggressive. So for me, is that he needs to be more aggressive in calling out Joe Biden in particular, because he is the one in office, and make it less about calling out Trump. Trump is not in office. So that would probably be one of my handful of critiques of Cornel West. I'm trying to think of any other ones. And no, the other thing is his website. Like the stuff that, like, you need to get all of your logistics, get everything up and going, not just your speaking engagements and going on interviews and knocking those out the park. Knock your website out of the park, knock your staff out of the park. Like that sort of thing, I guess, would be my only critique of Cornel West. All right, so now there is a new candidate that I would add here, and maybe we won't have much discussion about her because I don't know much about her. I don't know if any of you know much about her, but Her name is Claudia de la Cruz, and she's running with PSL, and she is a actual socialist, not a social democrat, running as a socialist for president. And she just announced, I think it was 2 days ago on Thursday, or maybe it was yesterday. She just announced, but this is an open question, not really going to each of you. So if you want to answer. Has everybody heard about her? Have you heard about this announcement? Anyone have heard about
2 days
Claudia?
ago, I saw the tweet, but
okay,
I have to look into her. I think they have an ad up, but I don't know much about her. But I looked at, like I said, I always say this, I like looking at issues pages, and I took a snapshot and I tweeted it because I thought it was a good start, and it hit some good topics.
Okay.
Yeah, I never heard of her before. You brought her to this discussion. I looked her up once you did, and I do have some organizing friends from PSL, so I'm gonna take a more serious look at her, but I had not heard of her until this discussion came up.
Absolutely. And for me, I didn't hear about her until she announced, I guess it was Thursday. So I'm loving all of these candidates. I do wish all of the candidates were running independent. Just imagine if Marianne Williamson and RFK was running independent. I would love to have 4 independent candidates running. Anything outside of the red-blue game, I'm for. Now we sort of talked about the candidates. So now I want to kind of move. We're gonna get briefly to the Brianna Joy Gray interview, but there's another question I wanted to ask here. Getting to a consensus solution may be the most difficult part of the different beliefs and strategies. So getting to a solution, because Day and Case is like, we got these differences, but getting to a solution, and the Crystal and Kyle and Brianna Joy Gray interview illustrates this point that I'm making about getting to a solution. When you think about the roadblocks we've had on the left, or not even just the left, but even if we're including libertarians, because there is some overlapping policy. But if you think, I forget the point that I was just about to make here. 1 second, I have it written down. Oh, so if you think that it feels like the thing that's keeping the biggest roadblock, let me say it this way, the biggest roadblock for some of these discussions and coalition building is the strategy differences. It feels like those strategies is what's keeping or preventing sort of coalition building. So let me give you an example. So if your strategy is, hey, let's try to get Medicare for all and push it through the Democratic Party, you see how that strategy sort of precludes you from a certain segment of people sort of coalitioning to get Medicare for all. Because if your strategy is to do this, but that strategy precludes coalition building, how do we do that? So I'll start with Case, because since solutions and coming up with a solution was such a big thing for you, or not just for you, but a big thing that you want to make sure we talk about. Like, how do you get past that and other roadblocks? Like, so first let's talk about what are some of the roadblocks to coalition building that you've seen, Case, because you are sort of you are friendly in both camps, more radical camps and more, progressive or even liberal camps that you're friendly with. So you hear, how do you, so we all have Medicare for all. Let's use Medicare for all because it's something we all want. What do we do? How can people who say, I'm not supporting the Democratic Party under any circumstance, I'm supporting Cornel West, for example, how do those people coalition just on this topic? So we're not in coalition and community for everything. One topic, single issue coalition, Medicare for all. Like how is that? How do you do that? Case, if you could take that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And once we can master this, we're going to go far. That's how I feel about this. One of the things, we had various opportunities, and I think it was touched on a little bit earlier in the stream. There were various opportunities for the left to come together, galvanize, and around something. People who blocked each other, people who don't speak to each other, curse each other out. When there's an opportunity arises for us to come together, we need to take advantage of that. So the Medicare for All marches, whether or not you thought that the people organizing it were amateurs, because when they first happened and they did it in the different states, I believe that's the first time that organization did it. But at least don't poo-poo it. At the very least, support it with your silence if you're not going to go. But at the most, go. Bring the organizers onto your show, onto your platform, whatever you're doing, and help promote it, because that's something that we all support. Then we had the Medicare for All march in Washington, D.C., another opportunity for us to coalesce who believe in Medicare for All, whether whether you're on the boutique left or whether you're on what they call the dumb left. I like that new smart left that Nick's been talking about.
No, I like the fact that you're using the slur to describe, because you're equally giving, you get what I'm saying? Like use dumb, and I like how you use the boutique. But go ahead, sir.
I call it the whole left ecosystem, because we all play our part in this left ecosystem. Malcolm X couldn't be Malcolm X without MLK. MLK couldn't go to LBJ and say, hey, there's this guy Malcolm X that you don't want to deal with him, so you got to deal with me. So we need, I think we need more people pushing on the outside and people who do not compromise. We need more of that, because that's what FDR had with the communists and the socialist parties. They had millions of members back in those days, and we're nowhere near that. So we need more of that. But back to us coalescing together, I want to go to the candidates now, because this is something that we haven't seen every cycle that goes on. I always wonder why the Libertarians and the Green Party do not have a debate with each other, and maybe have 3, 4, 5 debates on different topics. So I want to see Marianne Williamson and RFK have a discussion. They don't even have to call it debate, because from what I understand, if you have a debate, you're automatically disqualified, even though they're not doing it. They're not doing it now anyway. But anyway, let's call it a discussion. They should be having a tour, going out and saying, hey, the DNC is not including us, so we're going to work together and have a tour. Now, I know RFK has gone down in the polls, but when he was up, he probably was smelling himself, like we like to say in my community, and he probably was like, I'm not even going to look at Marianne. But now that he's came down, they're pretty much neck and neck. They should come together, coalesce, bring forth their policies, have a discussion, talk about the differences. And like we just talked about Medicare for All, he's for a public option, she's for Medicare for All. I would love to hear their discussion on how they would move forward with healthcare, period. And that would get a lot of, at least me as a political junkie, I would definitely watch that. And that could help promote and push their campaigns together. So that's how I think people can come together on different sides.
So for Forced to Vote is a perfect sort of illustration of the point of the issue we have here. We have the issue of Medicare for All, or just Medicare for All is not the only issue. I'm just saying of how we can't get anything accomplished, even though we have these overlapping beliefs. And I'm saying Forced to Vote is a classic example of why. So we have Forced to Vote, which is literally a movement. So ask yourself, why did certain people not participate in Forced to Vote? There was an array of a bunch of reasons, but let me take the petty reasons out, like the Jimmy Dore reasons. Let's listen to some of their more substantive sort of critiques. Oh, it's not going to accomplish anything. Oh, it's going to hurt. It's all about strategy that prevented certain people from participating. So this is, again, the issue that I'm saying we have, is that if we can't come up with a strategy that everybody agrees, we are never going to have that a case. There has to be a strategy that is palatable to both sides. And
But
I
would
don't
even say,
know what that is, but go ahead.
I would even say this, CJ, that when forced to vote did happen, and they had people who were for it. You know, Sam Cedar famously was for it at first, and then he was against it. And then Brie had a legendary debate. I really enjoyed the debate, but I really liked how Katie Helper came together and brought different voices together on a panel, and they were able to discuss different strategies and add to not just trying to force Medicare for all vote for Nancy Pelosi, to give a vote to Nancy Pelosi, but David Dayen, I believe it was David Dayen, or somebody else that brought in other ideas as well on getting somebody on this committee. And now we saw that the Freedom Caucus took they learned from those ideas, and they ran with it with having their leader, only one person needs to vote, and they can bring up a vote for his leadership, along with a plethora of other demands that they got out of that situation. So they learned from it. So now it's our turn to learn from this situation, and I think this is a way that we can definitely learn and strategize.
How about, let's bring in some of the others. Brooke, Chuck, Hector, what are your thoughts on some of these ideas that we're talking about here? What are your thoughts? Whoever wants to chime in here.
I kind of wanted to jump in because this is like my topic du jour, is like leftist cohesion, and I think it's really what holds us back. And I have this conversation with a lot of different people of that. You don't have this problem on the right, because the right is very good at, even if I don't agree with you, I'm gonna shut the fuck up and go with what we're doing right now. And once we get to the goal that we've achieved, then we can hash out all these disagreements and why I didn't agree with that, or how we're going to iron out the details. On the left, I feel like we really have no cohesion. You know, like Case is talking about, we have this left ecosystem, and it's a big ecosystem, but the most defining trait in the ecosystem is people are willing to shit on one another rather than get on board with, you know, we're shooting towards a goal. Can we agree that until we hit this goal, no more shitting on each other, or at least let's move in lockstep towards the goal until we get to the point that we've made some progress, and we could say to each other, okay, now we could sit down and talk about the things that we disagreed on the way to this goal. But to me, the left has way too much infighting, way too many plagiarists. There's people who come into the left later for you to find out that they're right wingers. You know, Tulsi was mentioned before. I could think of Jackson Hinkle's another one. I could think of a whole bunch of other ones.
He is a definite one.
Right, people who come in trying to say, I'm the leftiest left in the world, this, then a third. Once you look under the hood, they're talking about MAGA and all these right-wing ideas and anti-LGBTQ. So part of the left-wing ecosystem, and I truly believe this, that if we had more cohesion, if we had some of that cohesion that they have on the right to say, you know, maybe I don't agree with everything, but we have a target. Let's shut the fuck up, not shit on each other, and get to this target before we can start arguing with each other. We would sort of scale out a lot of the plagiarists and the scammers and the people who come to our side pretending to be something that they're really not. And once we hit these goals, then we could turn around and amongst each other iron out these differences, because that's what I find is holding us back, really, is that we don't have the cohesion, we don't have the unity, we don't move in unison the way that the right does. Force the Issue was a great example. I think a lot of these rallies are really good examples of people agree with the goal, but then they start arguing amongst each other about how do we get to this goal? Are you going to make the left at this street or the right at the next street? And it's not about that. Let's get to our destination. Then we could talk about what route we took here and the best way to get here again. So I could talk all day about this stuff because leftist cohesion is sort of like my topic to fix. But I think that if we could get to a point where we at least could agree on a target and move in unison towards that target, we would work out a lot of the other internal problems that the left has.
Great point. Before I ask another question, I want to get just your thoughts from if Chuck or Brooke, if you have an opinion on it. If you don't, then I can just insert my question. But go ahead, Chuck, and I guess we can go to Brooke and see if she has something after.
Well, Brooke, you want to go first? Because I do have thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, there's an old saying in coalition building that there's no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. And I think that on social media, I think we spend too much time trying to find and identify people we don't like to find the smaller and smaller reasons why we can't like somebody, and then we ignore them. And that is to our detriment. Our whole enterprise is about winning with the most votes. And when we go on social media, we tend to do the opposite thing, which is how small can I define myself? Because I'm a Maoist with Marxist tendencies. I read a lot of critical theory, and yet it just gets smaller and smaller and more obtuse. And so I think that I don't know, and I don't know how to get there, because we've acquired these habits of giving each other hell and blocking each other and all that stuff.
Yes. Yes, to what Brooke just said. I'm a reformed liberal, and when I started becoming a leftist, I didn't realize there are like 37 different camps of leftists. I'm like, can we just say anti-establishment? We'll get to the other stuff later, and I'm like, wow. It's ridiculous at some point, and appreciate what Case said, and Hector was speaking to my soul on the left division. I'm old school. I got a problem. I'm gonna DM you. Hey, let's see if we can hash this out on the side. Two activists who I love at each other's throats. Hey, can you work that out on the side? I know sometimes the principles are too hard, but a lot of times it's not about principles. A lot of times it's petty, and we could figure that out. And I remember when I was covering the Medicare for All rally, I had people up in my DMs. Why are you covering that, Chuck? Why are you going over there? And they would name like, there are hundreds of speakers, and like 5% or less of the speakers you didn't like. Come on, I'm interviewing people telling me about how their wife died from cancer. This is the interview I'm getting. My wife died from cancer. This is why she couldn't get the attention. Isn't that a little bit more important than you didn't like less than 5% of the speakers? Can we keep our eyes on the prize? Because I hear privilege talking. I hear someone with really good health care talking. I don't hear the issue. So I've always had like a low patience for that. I'm not saying there are no lines. There are some lines, as you said earlier. While I covered Medicare for All, there were certain things about raising up the war machine. There are lines, but it can't be every time we disagree. It can't be every time someone says something we don't like. We have to keep our eye on the prize. So I'm Hector. I'm actually very interested in left cohesion and how to make that happen. And I think we discussed that on our last call, CJ, about like a lot of people at each other's throats and forgetting the eyes on the prize. And that is different than a deep, deep philosophical disagreement.
Mike. CJ, were you trying to speak?
He's trying to get the mic. We can't hear you, CJ. CJ's trying to work it out. I can't hear Case Study either.
Yeah, my bad. I was saying while CJ's working it out, I just wanted to put emphasis on the ecosystem metaphor, because in the wild, people they say, I'm scared of lions. Well, we should kill all the lions because we want to make this place safe. So you kill all the lions, but guess what? Now the deers are going to overpopulate because the lions were keeping the deer population at a good level. So we all need each other to a certain degree, and we, like Hector said, we need to stop shitting on each other and make sure that if anyone has a strategy, even if you disagree, you could hit people up on the side, like my man Chuck said, or if you just disagree, I like the best thing to do if you disagree, just keep support with silence. Just have solidarity with silence. Say, hey, God bless. If that works out, then maybe I'll come in and help you out in a certain way. But other than, and I could call, what's the guy's name? Jack Uger's cousin or nephew.
Hassan.
Yeah, I was disappointed when he was one of the people that was like, oh, these guys don't know what they're doing, and just basically shitting on the Medicare for All support. And that's something that was unnecessary, and that's like punching down in a way, because these people it's not easy. It's not. I didn't even organize it, but I could tell. I know doing other organizing, trying to organize my own initiatives is not easy. And people put a lot of effort, people raise money, and we need to be able to support each other, even if you don't necessarily support the strategy, but we need to find ways to have solidarity.
All right, yeah, I had to go out and come back for my sound, so I may have to do that again. One of many things that's wrong with my whole setup, this has a whole short in it, so I have to make sure it's in the right position. But anyway, I got it back on, and thanks for the cleanup there, Case. But I do want to zero in a couple more questions, and then we'll get to the Brie, just to kind of address a couple of things. I keep calling it the Brie interview, but it's the Crystal and Kyle interview we'll get to in just a moment. But I do want to zero in on this. And this is something we're going to be talking ongoing with this show if we continue to do this periodically. And that is, you're saying left cohesion, and how do I really, and I've been talking to the Case about this sort of topic for over a year, but now I'm feeling like I really want to kind of push forward with this idea. So my whole hope is to eventually, even the Vanguard, even, Kyle and Kalinske and Brie and us and the Black Power Media and This Is the Revolution, all of these places just, coming together, we're going to disagree. Here's one of the problems, though, I feel like is so triggering and it kind of makes us go at each other, is that in our strategies that we don't agree on, some of the strategies, so for example, if I have a strategy that, the Chuck is just not only saying, I'm not with that strategy, I think that strategy is counterproductive, or I think that strategy is actually creating harm. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
This is where I think where people on the left cross that line to where we start to, now we're going after each other. Because if Emma or Sam Cedar sees me critiquing AOC and they think that's a bad strategy because they believe being friendly with these people is a good strategy to get things done, you see how can that be resolved? You get what I'm saying? Like, how can that, if your strategy involves being nice, having a sort of friendly perspective with a politician, and then the person you're trying to coalition with has an opposite strategy, an adversarial strategy. Let's take Shama Sawant and Cenk Uygur. How can they? You get what I'm saying? Maybe Cenk Uygur is a bad example. Whoever you could conjure up as a person who is very friendly, whose idea is to be very friendly to the Democratic leadership in order to get kudos, versus a person who's like, I want to be very militant against them. The strategy is not only, I don't want to be on board with, but this, you feel like it's counterproductive. How do you address that in these sort of instances? I'll go to you, Chuck, and then Case, and then Brooke.
I mean, I agree with what you're saying too. I do believe we have to have lines, right? You listen, we could talk about crystal ball. I forget crystal ball, but you'll talk about her later. The best argument about crystal ball, go 2 years back to tape, and crystal ball articulated a perfect argument against crystal ball. So what I'm saying is they're bad faith people. When I see that she's knowledgeable and everything she's saying now she knows is wrong, then I'm saying that's a bad faith move. And if someone's bad faith, I have to recognize it. I'm not dialoguing with bad faith people. But then they're good faith people. And they're good faith people who want to do some things. And what I've noticed recently, and you've been a critique, and I don't want to start no big deal, but there was the Door and Cornel West interview.
Yeah.
And you know, I had problems with that. You know, I have generally 3 problems.
Yeah. I've seen your tweets, so I know. I've retweeted a couple of them. Yeah, I know. Yes, go ahead.
Exactly. But and the demeanor, some of the distortions, but the third one is not about Jimmy Dore. It's about the entire white left. Can we separate race and class? There's a feeling that we just not talk about white supremacy, not talking about all the laws that are harming trans people's lives, not talking about all of these things when they are inextricably linked together. So when I hear people saying, well, we got to do that to unify the working class, I'm saying, well, what working class are you talking about? Because that sounds like the white working class. And in my definition of unity, I got a black working class, I got a Hispanic working class, I got everybody under that working class. And I believe that last part. Forget Jimmy, because he's a lightning rod. And you talk about him and everybody just goes nuts. But that point, where I believe Jimmy is absolutely wrong, is shared by a lot of white leftists. And I don't think we can move forward until we get on board for a multiracial working class that does not exclude the least of these, which is, I believe, what Dr. West is for. So that's my line. Like, that's my line. I ain't sacrificing the most marginalized to get more Trump voters of the working class. And we could debate it, we could talk about it, but yeah, that's a line. So I get what you're saying, and we have to have good debates on what those lines are, like we're having right now, and keep exploring. But I do get your point about their lines, but there are other cases, and I'd argue maybe most of the cases, that may not fall under that.
Yeah, and to your point, and if anybody else wants to kind of chime in on the Jimmy Dore, Cornel West, because this is another interview that's a good example of the left having different strategies, and that's what's preventing us from being on the same page. Now, there's strategies that get me upset. I got to be honest with you, but we all have to be better. I don't know, like better at trying to not develop strategies that's going to piss off your comrades. Like, that's something we have to try to do. And then we have to try to understand that if that person is making a good faith attempt to come up with strategies to get what they want without damaging things, like, so there's a lot of give and take is basically what's going to be needed. But to your point, Chuck, about the point that was made with Jimmy Dore and Cornel West, yeah, it's the same thing. Like I said, it's similar to what I said. Is that who are we making this palatable for, Jimmy? That was the question, the hypothetical question I was making. Who are we making this palatable for? And just like we always say here at RBN, I don't think it's a good strategy to go after the most partisan people. It's an exercise in futility to try to get a person who thinks Donald Trump is the next Messiah. You're not going to convince that person. That's useless. But the average Trump voter who's not like all staunch, they're just like, he's Republican, he's the most popular, I like that he's fighting, that's why I'm voting for him. There's really no other calculation. There's nothing I don't think in MAGA is this and that. You get what I'm saying? Like, that supporter is completely fine. The supporter who's in middle America, who said the Democratic Party sold us out with trade deals, that's why I lost my life savings, and that's why I'm going with Donald Trump. Those are the people, and I don't think those people would be offended by conversations outside of economic. Those people won't. No. And those are the people we should be reaching out to. Now to kind of but to kind of further the point that Jimmy's making, it's the same point I made here for our discussion. We have people here who are for Marianne Williamson, for RFK, So tailor your critiques in a way that's respectful. You get what I'm saying? And that, I mean, that's what I have to say about it. So anybody else who wants to jump in, and then we're gonna finally get to this interview here. Case, go ahead. You wanted to say something, sir? You got to get going or something?
No, I'm good. I just wanted to jump in and say this. You brought up some great examples of what we're talking about right now. So, RFK and Jimmy Dore had an interview, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, me personally, the fact that it kind of went over his view on Medicare for all and didn't like dig in, which I know Jimmy Dore, his passion is Medicare for all. I expected more from Jimmy, and a whole host of RBN people thought the same thing. So and you guys had critiques of that. Now, as far as I know, Jimmy didn't cancel y'all. Matter of fact, in the Cornel West interview that he did, he brought up Nick's tweets.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. We can have disagreements, and he could easily said, "Oh, forget RBN. They're not on my side. Oh, forget and cut it off." But he kept it moving. The other thing is the RFK, what we just brought up, the RFK and the Cornel West and Jimmy Dore interview. So you guys had critiques on both sides. The critique of Cornel West was that you can't say a mumbling good word about Biden because it's just going to make your campaign look bad. You can't say he's a little bit of a fascist.
Right.
Just call them both fascists. So you guys have that critique. I watched the stream that you all had, the panel, mm-hmm. and you said, I think 3 different people interviewed Cornel West separately and gave the same critique. And
they were saying
he didn't change. But you know what? At this point, Cornel West is not going to change. So we had that discussion. You guys had that discussion with Cornel West. I love the fact that Cornel West comes on y'all show. The first time he went on your show as a candidate, he said, "Hey, when we go and set up the next one," CJ was so surprised. He's like, "Oh, okay." Right? So he's getting that feedback from the people, and that's what we want from our leaders, our future leaders, because he's learning a lot. But in this case where we know he's not going to change, he's not going to change. So at this point, we got to move on. But on the other side of that was Jimmy Dore. We had the critique, and I agree with y'all, where class and racism, you guys had a lot of good examples. Jordan, I think I clipped him, Jordan Sheridan, that he had a good example as well and talked about this, that you can talk hand in hand about these things. And Cornel West is the perfect person who articulates it the best. So that's his superpower. We can't take that away from him, Jimmy. So hopefully, and I heard that Jimmy might come, or I don't know if
Jimmy reached out. Yeah, so you can say it like Jimmy. We've already talked to Jimmy. So if you think our critique pissed off Jimmy, it did not. He reached out. Literally, he watched the stream during the stream. Then he reached out. So we've already been in communication with Jimmy, with Cornel too. Cornel's camp. His wife reached out too. So we've already talked to him. And literally, right after we did our stream, they both reached out. So go ahead.
So, like Chuck said, if maybe it needs to be behind the scenes. Maybe I prefer, because I want to hear how you guys discuss these topics, and I think it's beneficial for us all to see it in public. So I would prefer to see it in public. But maybe there's sometimes, like Modi said, is you got to have a huddle together with your peoples, with family, and just discuss among family. So I'm looking, like I said, this show right here, what I've been seeing lately from the left of people disagreeing but being able to move forward, I'm getting excited. I'm really excited about what the future brings with this collaboration and solidarity.
Your excitement is infectious. And I think what I'm hearing about what happened with your Cornel West, CJ, your Cornel West panel or interview, and then Jimmy watching it and coming back in and having the chance to integrate what all happened there. I think we've got the answer to the question that we asked, like right here in this in these actions that are having, because people are actually interacting with each other instead of pushing each other apart. Now I see a big issue with elite left commentators like Kyle and Crystal, and then the people who kind of are the People magazine of those people. So like the Vanguard, I don't see those guys really doing. We're not doing the same kind of work. We're we're really trying to get things done, and I feel like they're doing this Entertainment Tonight kind of version of reflecting it back to us.
That is true. That is a great critique. I think we would have the same application here that Chuck was saying. Like we gotta have some sort of hurdle, and that hurdle may be just good faith and people that are really here to actually do some actionable sort of things. So I think those are two good thresholds to kind of start out with, and then. But I'm curious to hear what Hector you think about some of the same things, that interview with Jimmy, and anything else you wanted to comment on. Then we'll finally get to this interview here.
No, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts in it, and it's really good. You know, I think that this is one of those like differences that we have between the left and the right, is that on the right you have this feedback loop where something bubbles up, their media people bring it to the politicians actually do things to respond to what's bubbling up. You know, on the left, there's like this barrier where all the people are talking about something and the politicians kind of see it, but they don't acknowledge it. There's no feedback loop between the left ecosystem and the so-called left politicians to take those ideas and implement them into action. And I think that's one of the big failures that we've had on the left. The big failures of the Bernies and the AOCs is that they got all these people riled up telling them like, oh, we're going to have this democratic movement, but then they get into power and they took that ladder up with them, and they're not listening to us anymore. They're not in coalition with us anymore. They're not listening to our ideas. I can only imagine how different things would be if since 2018 these so-called left politicians were taking the ideas that bubbled up from the people and started implementing them in government action. We might have a very different left landscape today than we have now, but there's no feedback loop between the people and the so-called left politicians. Whereas on the right, if Tucker Carlson says something, you know, Donald Trump is picking up the phone call and calling him back, and he's going to do something to placate those people who feel that way. You know, Donald Trump invented the vaccine and is playing to the anti-vaxxers in his own party. You see what I'm saying? And we don't have anything like that on the left, where the people come up with an idea and it's something that's actually gaining steam. What you're actually likely to see is these people today, sort of commentators, shiv the movement in the back and then tell the politicians to either ignore it or not pay any homage. So we need to create that sort of pipeline of from the people to the politicians, of having these. If you want to be considered a left politician, you have to start implementing some of the ideas that come out of the left.
Yeah,
that is such a great point, and I would love to try to be able to do that. We would just have to come up with the idea of how to, because when you have the largest sort of media platforms on board with what the politicians are doing now, which is not doing anything. So you have the TYTs, you have the majority reports that are on board. When we come and say something the opposite, it's just a little hard. But Chuck, you wanted to chime in before we get to the video. Go ahead, sir.
I really do, because I believe so much has been made of Dr. West and how he treats Biden, and that I reject. And essentially, I think I first saw it on Pasta's Condo Couch, the first to bring it up. You call Trump a fascist. You don't call Biden a fascist. And it's taken on a life form of its own. And when I first heard it, I thought it was silly. And the reason I thought it was silly is because I saw so many interviews where he was going so hard at Biden. Even last week on your show, and it was a great nuanced discussion on fascism. And here's what Dr. West said. He said, to supporters of Biden, the fascist authoritarian face of neoliberalism, they don't realize how they're facilitating forms of evil, even as they're obsessed on the evil of Trump. And I have watched probably 30, 40 interviews. He constantly brings up his white supremacy, his fascism, his mass incarceration, his policies. Where he has a distinctor is the same one that I've used for years with no pushback. He labels Trump a fascist as the person, and he says Biden's policies are fascist, and here's why these policies do as much as harm elsewhere. And people don't like, they're saying, I don't like that you call him this semantic thing, Trump the fascist, and him. But I do the same thing. I've been doing the same thing for years. So why, forget West. Let me tell you why I do the same thing. As someone who covers neo-Nazi rallies, I don't see Biden hats with the white supremacists. I see MAGA hats with the white supremacists. There's a white supremacist wing that has taken his rhetoric, and there are two forms of power. There's policy power, and leftists are great on correcting liberals on policy power and saying, wait a second, look at the budget, look at the vote. But what I think we could be better at is understanding there's something about Trump and his rhetorical power and his power of the pulpit that engards, that brings more people into Charlottesville, that could help lead to a Heather Heyer death, that could make a Buffalo or a Jacksonville more likely. This is not like we're made up shit. It's really not. There's something real about his rhetoric that he's so openly fascist. I call it open fascism versus invisible fascism. And I think there's room to name that and say, yeah, that dude's a fascist. He's proud of it. And Biden's policies are fascist too. And he's making an intellectual distinction as a philosopher, as a PhD. He's not from the political camp, and the politician people are taking it in a very different, oh, you're being soft on him. You're being soft on him. Have you listened to what he's been saying about Biden for the last few weeks? I don't see it. I think if you came in last week and Jim, was the first interview you saw, I think you need to go back and watch a lot of interviews and see how hard he goes at Biden.
You're all of what you're saying is correct. And I think it was this last interview with him, I sort of spoke to that, and I said, what Cornel West, and this is what me trying to push him not to do this, what Cornel West, and at the time Nick was there, so I was saying you too, Nick, both of you are very intellectual, so you understand neoliberalism. It's not like it's way better than fascists. Yeah. Like you understand that. The average person does not. The average person hears neoliberal and fascist. They understand fascist because of Trump has been pumped up a lot more. So we think that's worse. We see that as a worse thing. So as a point of strategy, because these are very short conversations that you don't have a long time to explain something intellectually, for somebody to go, okay, that makes sense why you're calling one a neoliberal and one a fascist. Because to your point, Chuck, he makes sense. Like, okay, yeah, that's why we didn't have really a second pushback after that. It was like, because that makes sense. And neoliberal is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's not like it's slightly good. You get what I'm saying? So,
but CJ, I want to implore everyone to go back
go ahead.
to I want to implore everyone to go back to what you did.
This last one.
Minute 41 to minute 50. It was such a rich dialogue on fashion. It was an intellectual dialogue. You let the man speak. He spoke it. He talked about divergence. He talked about why he calls people brother and sister. And he made sense. He talked about his Christianity. He talked about it didn't mean they're his friend. He talked about it meant that they have the capacity to change it. As a Christian, he has to do that. And it was so rich. And I really wish those 9 minutes were uplifted over a little soundbite here or there. He's calling me fascist, not calling that fascist. That's what people need to focus on, in my opinion.
Absolutely. All right. So I think we can get to the video now. It didn't look like anybody else was waiting to say anything. Of course, we're not covering the whole video, but I think there is some points that I think the overall thing that's happening here furthers our dialogue, or it contributes to our dialogue about how do we move forward. In this interview, you have Kyle and Crystal, husband and wife, advocating for Joe Biden, and then you have Brie, or Brianna Joy Gray, if you don't know her by Brie, who's advocating for Cornel West and against Joe Biden. I think she does a good job. I didn't watch the whole thing. I only watched maybe 30 minutes of it. So I think she does a good job, at least in the part that I've seen. Now, the way we do this, we play the video. I can't see you because I'm on the video page. So if you want to, hey, just stop it right there, and I'll stop it if you want to make a point, because there's a lot of points that all of us are going to want to make or chime in on to kind of combat or just to chime in, to give our ideas of what they're saying. But this is a good sort of exhibit for us to use in the show that we're trying to do today.
Welcome everybody to a special edition, I'd say, of Crystal Kyle and Friends. Not only is it Crystal Kyle and Friends, it's also sort of like a dual thing going on. We got Brianna Joy Gray in the house, and this will be on her channel as well, the Bad Faith Podcast.
Little crossover episode.
Little crossover episode.
Love that for us.
Definitely. Looking forward to it. So we're going to discuss Cornel West's campaign and everything around that. And I just want everybody in the audience to know, because I don't know if we've said this publicly before, that like he's been invited on multiple times and he just hasn't come on yet. And you know, this goes all the way back to when he launched.
He's shunning you guys.
Yeah.
He's shunning you guys, huh?
He hasn't come on yet. You know, he eventually, I don't know. You know, it's up to him. Ball's in his court.
And we had him on before.
We had him on before. Yeah, before he announced his campaign. I mean, we're going back to when the People's Party thing launched.
Right.
We invited him on all the way back then too, and just haven't heard back or anything. But I just don't want people to think we're debating Cornel West, but like Crystal and Kyle are refusing to talk to Cornel West. We'd love to talk to Cornel West. We want to have him, you know, we'd love to have him on at any point in time to discuss anything and everything. So we're going to discuss his campaign a little bit here. And so I want to lay out what my position is, and then Brie, I'll turn it over to you and you can respond to it. And Crystal, you can jump in at some point and say what your position
We'll go
is.
through all the things.
We'll go through all the things. So
now I'm going to stop it here because I wanted to play that first part and then show you something else before
Oh, the microphone again. Oh. Oh.
While he gets that together, anybody want to say anything?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised Cornel's not going on their show. I mean, Kyle's obviously hostile to him. You know, if I was had any sort of say in, you know, hey, should I go on this show? I'd be like, yeah, maybe not for a while. You know, let it settle out. I mean, they just don't seem like they'd be very receptive to him.
Well, as a political consultant, Brooke, what would be your advice to Cornel West if you could give him advice on media appearances or anything?
Oh, Jiminy, you know, I think that the Jimmy Dore interview was a disaster because they came in with a lot of energy that had nothing to do with the interview, and then that just got all mashed up. I would like to see, and I've actually been seeing this more and more, I'd like to see Cornel West on some more kind of mainstream stuff, because it's mainstream people who need to hear him too. You know, that's what, you know, I'd be like, you know, more Breakfast Club, more, you know, getting out in front of, what's that terrible one that I never listened to? Save America. Get on that way. Blow their minds.
That would be interesting. I would watch that though.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, CJ, I don't want to take over your show, buddy. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks for everybody, because you already know what's happening. If my mic goes out, then I have to just go out and come back in. It feels like that's the only fix, because trying to fidget with these wires don't do it.
Somebody said The View. Right. Jennifer said The View in the chat.
Yes.
Yes. Let's do it.
All right. So now let me see if it works this time. Now, if for whatever reason, let's say this doesn't work, I'll send the link to one of you, and you can bring up the same video. It doesn't matter who brings it up, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I'll send the link to you if it doesn't work this time. All righty. Let's see. So far, so good. It's moving, but nothing is happening yet. Let me send the link to one. Let me put the link in the chat just in case there. So what I want to cover is the reason I want to cover this video, and I think it fits to the show today, is that when they start talking about Joe Biden's accomplishments and why aren't we giving him credit, it's an important conversation for us to sort of address, because and I tweeted this out, like, and let me read my tweet. I'm not going to bring it up because I'm not going to read all of it. I said, I really, in reference to this video, I really need people to kind of understand what's happening here with this video. And that is, we have independent media, so-called independent media, who is pushing for Joe Biden, the corporate candidate. Do we understand, like, what exactly is happening here? And I think I'm going to turn off my camera. That might make it work better. I'm going to turn my camera off and see if that'll help. And take this off here. All right. It's still moving a little bit slow, but I'm gonna give you the link here in just a second, and then Case, if you can just play it, and I'll play it from, if you're able to do it.
Yeah.
All right. You should.
Let me see.
You should.
You put it in the private chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the private chat here.
Okay.
And give it a second here.
Sure.
Because everything is slow here.
I see it. Okay, boom.
All right, you got it. There you go.
Yeah, I got it here.
All right, and apologies to everybody watching. I don't know why this is happening today.
Yeah, just give me one moment as I bring it up here. Okay, here we go.
Right on.
Share.
Right on. I'm gonna get a notification in a second here.
All right. Yeah, let me know if you could see it.
1 second. It's coming up. It just says loading.
West's campaign and everything around that.
And
I just want everybody in the audience to know, because I don't know if we've said this publicly before, that like he's been invited on multiple times and he just hasn't come on yet.
So
and,
I turn my camera off, try to make this a little bit better so you can hear me, but for right now, while my internet is kind of bad, you can't see me. But Kai, if you could make it full screen, and then you can just, if you could move forward to 4 minutes and 55 seconds, and we can start there.
4 minutes and 55. And everybody, let me know if you can hear it. Make sure you can hear it.
Or whatever other possibility of making this argument of the lesser of two evils. I would be open to the idea that, okay, this is the last one. Donald Trump, fine. He tried to steal the election. Fine. That is a new line that he has crossed. But absent an acknowledgement that we are creating our own destiny by lowering the bar in these ways, I'm not comfortable coming out and criticizing anybody who no longer wants to be complicit in that kind of a system that's enabled the Democratic Party to not have a primary, treat Marianne Williamson as badly as they've treated her, treat Bernie Sanders as badly as they treated him.
Can you pause it there?
And say they don't have.
Yeah. This is a good point that Brie makes, but this is the point that I want to make, and that is, this has to be a very weird position that Kyle and Crystal are in, where their number one candidate is Marianne Williamson, while at the same time they have to advocate for Joe Biden, the candidate that's refusing to debate Marianne Williamson. You see what I'm saying? So this is where, to me, it feels. This is where, to me, my critique of some in the professional managerial class is that since the policy beliefs that we're talking about, let's say Medicare for all, for example, isn't something they need to have, they can be flexible of their opinion. They can be flexible. Oh, yeah, Joe Biden this time. Oh, Marianne Williamson this time, because whether or not the policy becomes actual law isn't relevant to them. Like, it's either or, it's not relevant at all whether Medicare for all becomes, it's more of a thing of, I'm a good person, so I want everybody to have Medicare for all. And that's why I want Medicare for all. Not necessarily because I need Medicare for all, but because you're not dependent on that policy, you have the ability to go back and forth. You have the ability to go, well, Joe Biden's not that bad, and this is the reason why he's not that bad. So that's what I wanted to put in here. Unless anybody else wanted to chime in, you can go back to the video.
I'm gonna chime in here for a second, just before we start off, because I think that this kind of goes back to the conversation that we were having before about strategy versus how we move on the left, you know, and on the part of Crystal and Kyle, even if I were to intellectually be able to come to a place where I understand the arguments that they're making in terms of pure strategy, if you are a leftist, I think this is terrible strategy to say to Joe Biden, well, you're going to get my vote regardless. So there's nothing you need to do for me. You know, you're going to get my vote no matter what you do. And so if they are really on the independent left, it doesn't make any sense for them to just come out and say, well, you already have my vote. There's nothing for you to do anymore. I think that we need, if the argument was truly to push Joe Biden to the left, even if you don't take that argument seriously, the only way you're going to push him to the left is by threatening something. In this case, yes, threatening to withhold your vote. If there's nothing for you to withhold from Biden, what reason does he have to change anything at all? And so going back to the conversation we were having earlier, even if I were to say like, okay, well, maybe if you're in a swing state and you're really that afraid of Trump and you know you're willing to make that choice of the lesser of two evils, even if you can intellectually get yourself to that place, at this point in the race, that's just bad strategy. It's like you're going on a date with somebody, but you already know going to this date, they're going to give it up at the end of the day, no matter what. What type of date are you going to take them on? Are you going to take them somewhere nice? Are you going to bring your own? You're not going to do anything because you know at the end of the day, the case is sealed. So that's sort of the way that I see this playing out. You know, you Crystal and Kyle already said, well, Joe Biden, I'm going home with you at the end of the day. So there's nothing you need to do for me.
That's a freaking awesome analogy that it perfectly encapsulates what they're doing, how they're giving away their leverage in that analogy. But go ahead, anybody else wanted to chime in?
I'm sorry, CJ. I got this classic video real quick. It's only 1 minute.
Yeah, insert it, sir. Yeah, there we go. I know this one.
The major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them.
Because the way the Democratic Party is run now for quite a number of presidential cycles is they pick a nominee in a kind of half-assed process that doesn't really represent much of anybody, and then they tell everybody to just shut up. Don't bring up anything that will complicate life for your nominee. You know he's not for you on this. Why badger him? He's not going to be for you for reasons that you don't understand but are good reasons. Shut up. Turn off your brains.
If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party because the left had nowhere to go.
100%. So I just wanted to share that.
I wonder what capacity. I always wonder what capacity was Lawrence talking about here. Like, who was he working for where he was able to let this cat out of the bag, sort of thing? Like, what was he doing? And that's still, I haven't been able to figure that out, but we can get to the video.
I believe he worked in the Senate. Like, he was a congressional operative for some senator, I believe. I would have to, I don't want to spend
No, it was a big senator.
Yeah,
I do remember it was a big senator. I know at the time he's making this comment, he wasn't working for that senator. I was wondering, what was he, and he wasn't working for MSNBC. What was he doing in order to make him feel free enough to even say that? Because he won't say that now, and he wouldn't have said that while working for the Senate. But go ahead, Case, if you want to play the video.
Yeah, let's go back to the video.
Have to hold a free, fair election. The DNC argued that in court. You know,
so let me explain a little bit of my position. I think that'll help respond to some of what you said there. And I'm also curious to dig in a little bit more to your analysis of how the Biden administration has actually been in reality. So last election in 2020, I did live in a swing state. I lived in Virginia, still live in Virginia, registered in Virginia. And it did not feel good to vote for Joe Biden, but I decided to vote for Joe Biden, which is something I said publicly at the time. But I said something very similar to you, which is like, listen, this was not easy for me. If you, wherever you live, swing state, not swing state, et cetera, you do whatever you analyze is the right thing to do. And the reason that I voted for him primarily at that time, even though I thought he had an atrocious record in the Senate, even though, complicit in the Iraq War, complicit in bad trade deals, complicit,
What I would say is that with this sort of thinking that Kyle and Crystal are going to be talking about, what's different than voting for a Republican? What is tangibly if you can vote, if you're voting for somebody who doesn't believe that you should have Medicare for all, if you're voting for somebody who doesn't believe to end qualified, whatever your issues are, if you're voting for them regardless, what would be different than voting for a Republican who also doesn't hold your beliefs? That's what I don't get. What is the difference? Go ahead, bro.
They're using terror tactics, for lack of a better word. They're saying that anything on the Republican side is so awful and fascist, and it'll create ruin in the country and in the world. Therefore, you have to vote for the Democrats because the stakes are so high. So to me, it's a terror tactic. And I every time I hear it, my instinct is to be like, screw you. I'm not doing what you're.
Yeah.
I'm not going to play that. I'm not going to be terrorized into who I vote for.
And if anything, it should be the other way around. It should be the other way around. We should be terrorizing the politicians to vote the way we want them to, not the other way around.
Yes. I was just thinking,
spot on.
What if Cornel West cut an ad, and this is for my consultant friend Brooke. He cut an ad where you take this clip of Lawrence O'Donnell and just repeat it a couple times. The left has nowhere to go. The left has trust me, the left has nowhere to go. And then Cornel West just pops up on the screen. I'm here. Boom.
That's a great idea. I would love to see him do it. I would love to see anybody do that who is outside of this whole, blob bubble that everyone is in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That I think these two are in. Kyle and Crystal sound to me like people who have been consumed in the blob.
Mm-hmm.
It does. I have the same sort of critique because it's like you have to be in a bubble. You almost have to be in a bubble to say what they're saying here. Mm-hmm. There's no way you can be experiencing quote unquote Bidenomics and have this sort of critique. You have to be insulated from it.
I think you're being too kind. You're being too kind because Crystal Ball has a video from a couple of years ago where she makes the most articulate case, she was speaking to Bernie at the time, of what we're talking about against Crystal Ball today. So it was at such a level of detail making our case why Cornel West should run. I can only conclude she doesn't know that money and incentives are really what's going on here. That's my only conclusion.
I agree.
You can continue, Case.
All right.
Like terrible things on crime, all that stuff, right? The primary reason I voted for him was because of the National Labor Relations Board and because labor politics and building out union power in this country, to me, is one of the most important goals and something that I think we all share and leftists generally believe. Now, in retrospect, not only do I feel good about that vote, he's actually surprised me. Now, I've got all kinds of issues, right? On the National Labor Relations Board, though, specifically, they just issued a ruling which could be a complete game changer for unions. And just to explain to people a little bit, basically, in the past, bosses could union bust with impunity, no accountability. Now, the process going forward is completely changed. If bosses are caught union busting, then that's it. There's no more election. It's canceled. They have to recognize the union and start bargaining with them. That's the biggest shift in labor relations we've had in our lifetime. So that's why at this point, I'm not only, it's likely to, I'm a Marianne supporter as well, but we can all see the most likely outcome is it's going to be Trump versus Biden. Not only would I say that protecting the Biden National Labor Relations Board isn't important enough for me to vote for Joe Biden, but it is important enough that I would actively encourage, but I'm not going to shame them for whatever they decide to do, but I would actively encourage people who are in a swing state to vote for Joe Biden, if for no other reason than to protect that board.
So I think that's a perfectly defensible position. And I had this conversation on my podcast in the last episode, and there were people who would characterize that position as, I mean, you've heard the thing, you've been on the internet, being too credulous about Biden, or, being too comfortable in one's own position in life and not needing enough change and being happy with the status quo. People will say things like that. I think actually that if your priority, if you believe the path to meaningful change is going to primarily come through a kind of, I don't say this dismissively, but a kind of labor incrementalism, meaning there are meaningful labor gains that happen, but are not the type of which would radically transform the system the way that some people want to happen in a shorter term. And the way that some people might argue Bernie Sanders represented his movement as the goal of being, then that's a defensible position. But I have to hold space for the reality that there are people for whom, even as significant as those labor gains are, it's simply insufficient. And what they see when they look at the trajectory of the last 50, 60 years of Democratic Party politics, when they read Listen Liberal and see the longer game the Democratic Party making a concerted choice to back away from labor in a way that has gone on for decades and isn't necessarily turning around as a consequence of Joe Biden having some good NLRB appointments.
So let me actually,
and then I want to jump into it.
So number one, I don't think that in massively increasing union density, I actually don't see that as incremental change. I mean, if you look at the chart of the decline in the middle class,
and we're gonna end it here. This is the part that I wanted to hear, and because trying, and Brie answers this NLRB sort of argument perfectly. This is not enough. That's simply not enough. That's simply not enough. You showed up to buy a $20,000 car and you have $100. Sorry, that's not enough money to get what you want to get. And this is the critique of the professional managerial class that I've had. You always overblow what Joe Biden has done good, and you always underwhelm what Joe Biden does bad. And that's what we're seeing here. Are we really to make election decisions off of the NLRB? Is that serious? That's what we might. Is that even serious? So this is the professional managerial's calculation. Yeah, we got a little nuclear war, but we got that NLRB. You know what I'm saying? It's so ridiculous. And then my other sort of analysis of this is, let's sort of take what she's saying for face value. Oh, union density is up. Are you talking about the union density that sells out their for rank and file all the time? The union density that's in bed with the Democratic Party? What are you talking about? Like, crystal ball? Like, this is not good at all the way around the board. That's my take. We'll get everybody's take of this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. I meant for this to go about 2.5 hours, and I think we're roughly at about 2.5 hours. So that's my take. Let's start with Brooke, ladies first, and then we'll go to Hector, and then we'll go to Chuck, and we'll end with Case there.
Well, that is a beautiful take, and I'm going to build off of that, because I think what Crystal did was she tipped her hand that they get money from unions. I think that, as an insider, I know how this shit goes. I know how money gets played, and that kind of influence is going to influence what you say, what people say on camera. And I think that pulling the NLRB and union density out of a world where we're facing World War III, a land war in Asia, is the most ridiculous thing if that wasn't bought out, if that isn't SEIU money pushing that message, then they're even more bigger dumbasses than I thought they were. Oh, look, it's we've been joined. There's a new person.
What up, Jay?
Hey, Jay.
And that's JB. What's up, JB? How you doing, sir? Is he frozen?
Hey.
Oh, no, there you go. There you go. Now we can see you.
Yeah, good to see you guys. I just was listening in. I wanted to add just a little bit to the conversation. I have an analogy. Now, everybody knows that I always have
He's known for these. Yeah, he's known for these.
Yeah. So here's the thing I wanted to point out. Let's say hypothetically you go to a banquet hall, and in that banquet hall, you're sitting there. There is a banquet table full of food, and this banquet table gets eaten up by the very few people that are there at the table, but there's some crumbs left. If you are full crumb, if you serve those people who are full crumbs, are they still satisfied? You just merely top them off, right? But those of us who come into that banquet hall that are starving, we're hungry, and you try to give us crumbs, how is that going to satisfy our needs?
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same thing when you come to the opinions of privileged people like Crystal and Kyle, Sam, Chank, Anna, and everybody else. Is the exact same thing. They're full. They've had their fill already in a socioeconomic status. The rest of us are sitting here with our tummies grumbling. And then you say, here's a cracker. Here's some crumbs. There you go. That's good enough. We're all full, aren't we? But no, we're not.
That's a great
Because
example.
here I am, sitting here, literally on my account with $10 to my name, with other bills coming, as a disabled person that is living in damn near poverty. And yet I hear, well, everything's good. Biden's doing this. By the way, as a disabled person that's not working right now, how is the union going to help me?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the point I think that they really need to get. There is an out of touch mentality that they're saying, well, things are going okay. And there's this point where they are now have become the incrementalists that they have demonized years ago. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to listening to the voices of the people who are the most marginalized among them, they've actually went behind the gate, they've went into the suburbs, and now it's out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
So now they're getting pissed off because they have a marginalized Black woman that's sitting in front of them telling you, hey, wake up, you're wrong. And then they won't even mention our names, even though we were just in the media article. They won't even bother to mention our names and say, well, they may have a point. Maybe we need to uplift the most marginalized voices among us in order to be able to get out of here. Because the point is, whatever happens to us is eventually going to happen to them. The only reason why it hasn't happened to them yet is because they continue to put on blinders, earmuffs, because they're one. And so I think that's the point that I wanted to make, is that you need, in order, we are the canary in the coal mines, right? Especially Black people. Sorry to white people, but we are the canary in the coal mines, because if they do it to us, they're going to do it to you. First, they're going to start off with the poor white people. Then they're going to go off to the white middle class, as we see going right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Ding, ding, ding.
Important to listen to the most marginalized among us, and that's all I had to say.
Yep,
That's why we have JB. That's why we have JB just popping in. I got to do these weekend. Yeah, I got to do these weekend ones because that's when I'm able to confer with JB. Thank you, JB. You're welcome to stay and listen to the rant, or
What
if
a
you want to
cameo.
check out and watch us on the video, that's good too. But I think we were gonna go to, was it Hector next or was it Chuck next? I can't remember who we left off.
Well, I'm gonna take over Sorry.
Yeah,
Chuck.
let's go to Hector. Yeah, let's go to Hector.
No, I love you, Chuck.
Let's go to Hector.
No, but the fact of the matter is that when you hear these leftist, so-called leftist pundits talking this way, and I'm one to speak because we've had this conversation before. I am a registered Democrat. I vote in Democratic primaries. I don't have a problem if I feel compelled enough to vote for a Democratic candidate. But at this stage in an election, you're basically saying, well, just like JB said, well, I've had enough. You've got me. And that's dangerous to say at this point in the race, because what they're basically telling us is this is the most left that Joe Biden can be, and there's no point to push him any further left. I don't believe that. I'm not willing to make that calculus. I'm not willing to say that this is the most left we can push him. And if we're not threatening him with a tangible outcome from withholding our power, we're not going to see how far left we can push him. So to me, what they're doing in a way is somewhat dangerous, because they're telling voters to be complacent, to say, well, this is the best that we can get. And I'm just not willing to make that calculus. I don't think we can say this is the most left that we can get out of Joe Biden. I think personally we can get more left, and we're not going to find out by giving up the game before the game even started.
Spot on. And Chuck, and then we'll round it, end it with a case.
Sure. First of all, ding, 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 all around, ding, ding, ding to JB. Brooke, we're just talking about privilege. We're talking about privilege. It's not just Crystal Ball. It's not just Kyle. It's the journalist profession that you have millionaires talking about Medicare fraud. Maybe you shouldn't be the person talking about Medicare fraud. We would not have panels of all white people just talk about black people, or all non-Jewish people talk about Jewish people. Yet every day we have rich people talking supposedly about class issues. You're not qualified. We wouldn't. It's the only ism that we're allowed to not have any representation. Your journalists back in the day, and there were more, broke. So Crystal Ball, I do believe that she is bought. I think that it's clear from her past comments. There's no question about it. But I want to end with this. Your point earlier, CJ, about you have a bunch of little issues, and I want to say little, maybe I shouldn't say little, but you have these gargantuan issues. Okay? And we're in a place, at least I believe there are three catastrophic issues that I would call bipartisan fascism. The first you talked eloquently about is Ukraine. We're on the precipice of potential World War III, at worst, nuclear war. That's not a little thing. We have two parties that want endless war, military, industrial complex, China's next. That is real. That's catastrophic. The second issue is climate change. You have one party that denies man-made climate change exists, and you have a second party that doesn't want to talk about the military, the number one polluter on the planet. We're not going to talk about the number one polluter on the planet. We're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. So Democrats like to make fun of Republicans, rightfully so, but we got to make fun of that too and say that's ridiculous. You're almost just as bad. That's number two. That's catastrophic. We need an answer to that. And then the third thing, in my opinion, is the proliferation of cop cities. That we have seen people are proposing cop cities, and if we don't stop Atlanta, the future of America and beyond will be a unified dystopian police force. The people in Atlanta know this. And this is bipartisan fascism. So we can't solve those catastrophic problems within the two-party system. You have to give me an alternative, because I see all those three levels as more fascist than even a right-wing president.
I agree with that. In case, you and I brought this together. You three of the people that are on here, you either suggested or got here. So this is really our first show, and Chuck too. Really, the three of us, kind of the idea and then the logistics of getting this together. So, Case, what say you about all of this? How do you like the first episode? And then chime in on the topic at hand, which is, this last thing that we're commenting on, and what JB came in and commented on. So the floor is yours, sir.
Mike.
You're Mike.
Thank you so much. I'm very optimistic about where this is going, where this dialogue is going. As we saw with that conversation itself, it was Brie, Crystal, and Kyle. And like Kyle said, it got spicy at times. But exactly what they did, I want to see us do, which we did today to a certain extent with different topics. And I would love to see that happen even more. I would love to see this show be used to bring people who you might not have checked in with in a while, or maybe somebody got banned. And I think I heard Sabby say one time that you guys had beef with Tim, and then after a while, Tim Black,
now we're fine.
He tweeted out like some kind of reconciliation kind of tweet, and that's a great opportunity to say, you know what, let's hop on a call and let's chat it out. You know, I would love to see that kind of dialogue. I know me personally, my wife is here texting me now. I don't think I'll be able to do this as often as I would love, but I definitely want to see it continue. And I definitely think that this could be the start of something beautiful. And me personally, I don't think Crystal is bored, but I'm biased. Like CJ say, I chat with everybody on different sides of the spectrum, and I've had some friendly conversations with her. But I think that this is going to be the beginning of something beautiful, where if we can all in the left ecosystem start to dialogue and strategize, you know how scary that is for the elites. Oh my goodness, I'm getting excited about this. Come on, let's do it.
In case if you're not able to attend, we'd love to have you here yourself each time we do this. But if you're not, because you're in these spaces, just like you were able to suggest 3 people today, you're the person that's going to be, hey, try this person, bring this person, that person. So you still will be intricately sort of involved. If you're not here, you're at least helping to get some of the people
I can help, my man.
You saying Case is the QB? Is that what you're saying? Case is the QB?
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Much love.
All right, much love to all of you here. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Hector. Thank you, Chuck. And thank you, Case. I would love to have all of you participate in this regularly. Or if you have suggestions for people that can fill in for you if you can't be here yourself, that would be great too. I'll put you in the back and you can take off anytime you like. I'm just going to do a couple of announcements. Go ahead, Case, if you were going to say something.
I'm going to say this and then I'm going to jump out. CJ, I'm going to send out the first challenge. Tim Black, I don't know if he watches this or if you want to tweet him, say, hey, the next time we do this, I would love to have you on where you can talk about Cornel West or whoever it is. And also, any disagreements, let's hash it out in a friendly, respectful way. That's my first challenge for the second show of this. All right. I'll see you later, my man CJ. I really appreciate you bringing us together and providing the platform. Much love to you. Much love to the chat. Adios.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, everybody, again. And that's a pretty good challenge. I don't know if Tim, schedule-wise, because he does have a family, but if we're able to hook something up and have him attend a panel like this, that will be great. And then just expand more and more and getting more and more people, I guess you can say, involved. Now, I will leave you with this discussion that they're having. And thank you, everybody, for watching on this Saturday. Hit that thumbs up, hit that like button. A couple of announcements and super chats. So I'm not quite gone yet. Almost forgot. Last time I checked, we were roughly, let me see where we were. Last time I checked, we were roughly about a little bit over 400 likes. So let's see if we can get to 500. So hit that like button on your way out. Where are my announcements at? Yeah. Become a Patreon member. Patreon, you can join as little as $2 a month. This is the way we're paid to get mics, unless we get fundraiser. I'm fundraising now for a laptop because this one's messing up, as you saw today. What was I just saying? Oh, Patreon. So if you see our graphics, if you like the video clips that we do, our one and only employee does all of that work. And if you become a Patreon member, she's paid out of that. So that's another reason to become a Patreon. As little as $2, you can join. This is my fundraiser here. The graphic is done. I'll post that on Twitter and probably the next episode we'll talk. But GoFundMe. As you saw, my equipment malfunctioned today. So I'm trying to raise money to get a new laptop. CJ Equipment Fundraiser is GoFundMe and you see the link there on the screen. If you're able to contribute to that GoFundMe, it's probably going to be about a month or more to raise the money for my laptop, to get a new laptop. And it's not just a laptop, but all the equipment to stream. If you're able to do that, thank you. The other thing is, here is our website. Where's our website? Check out our website if you want to see any of the latest. If you want to join a different mailing list we have on there, you can do that. You want to check out our summits all in one place. You want to see pictures of our community work, videos of the library renovation that we're doing in Detroit. You can check out our website right there. Email. This is our contact email. Just throwing that out if you needed to email us. And then I think that is all. I'm looking through my notes here. I think that is all. Make sure you check out Rome's documentary. It's called Death to America. You can see that on our page. Make sure you check that out. Also, this fundraiser, we reached the goal 750. Actually, went over the fundraiser, and JB will be delivering toiletries and other hygiene products to the unhoused in Orlando based on that fundraiser. So thank you, everybody. All of your money will be put to good use. So think about it. $750 you could donate to Democratic Party. You won't see anything tangible. $750 you guys donated to JB, and he's going to be going out giving out something that tangibly can be used by unhoused people. You see the different dynamic and why we have a different theory of change. If you like our graphics, here is the fundraiser for that. This is the one for Aaron, our editor, our one and only employee. That is the graphic for her fundraiser. If you're able to contribute, please do. So now I'll get to the super chats. Wow. We're at 23 now. I'm going to read through these super chats. Hang on a second. This could be my wife, so let me make sure. No, it's saying pay your cell bill or we're going to cut your service off. That's literally the message I just got. So let's read the super chats. I'll start from the bottom. This is how I make sure I don't miss anything. Jesus, what's going on here? Okay. This one says, remember how Crystal and Kyle were so triggered about Cornel's announcement that they had to go online immediately while driving their Suburban? Yes, I do remember that. They should call it Driving Miss Daisy. What's another one? Driving Miss Crystal, Driving Miss Ball. Driving in a car with liberals, I guess that's another name. But anyway, let's continue here. Here's another super chat. The Biden regime is committing a heist on the American people by expropriating all the money siphoned from working people's paychecks without consent. Thank you, DC, for that super chat. I didn't mention your name earlier. Warren, thank you for your super chat, Warren. And Warren is also a brand new member on YouTube. Welcome to the RBN community on YouTube. Warren, brand new member, RBN community. And this is Roger Meadows. What's up, Roger? This looks like this is a second part to another one. Let me see where your other... Let's go to all of Roger's because they look like they're connected here. So I'll go to Rogers because I'm not sure. Oh, that's not Roger. Right here. It's the one. It says, Hector made a classic transactional argument. And then Roger goes on to say, Manihan, I think case. I think that's the right way to say that. And then another one. Now, or JB, we are demanding a Thanksgiving Day feast. And One party gives us nothing and the other gives us a house salad with breadsticks. So you're talking about the analogy that JB gave about crumbs, and Roger Meadow gives another good analogy. All great analogies. Make sure you cite the author if you use them. Just joking. Alexander, Kyle and Crystal, White House influencer campaign. Them folks should interview Julius Malema. Yeah, right. They would never. And that's one of the leaders, African leaders he's talking about there. The ones that's been going viral on the videos. He's one of them. Crystal and Kyle, know this strategy damn well. Kyle said he expected nothing from Biden and he exceeded his expectations, meaning doing nothing, Biden would still meet Kyle's expectation. That is a great point. So if your expectations, Kyle, was 0 and Biden delivers 0, isn't he meeting your expectations? If he delivers 0.0001, isn't he exceeding your expectations? You see? I read those two from Roger. Can we confirm Brie was great the entire video? I can confirm she was great. The part I saw like the first 30 minutes. And if you saw all of it and you confirm that, then I'll go with you. And that is from Chant. Thank you for that super chat. Did I read the name of the other one? No, this one's from Vicky Blair. I didn't read your name, but thank you, Vicky. I gotta remember to do that. Here goes Meteor Dreams. You were in the chat the other day. Jimmy has a lot of races on his chat. I'm appalled. Sabi had the same observation that there were some racist people in the chat of the stream of Jimmy when he was interviewing Cornel West. So I can attest that I've heard that. And here's another one from Meteor Dreams. Jimmy went right for clicks. It's obvious, too obvious. Oh, here's another one. And that was also from Meteor Dreams. It's another one here from Buster Peak 21. Not worried about infighting. I call that rigorous debate. In the end, coalition building and organizing around shared goals is key. Thank you for that one. Here's another one. Holistic Radical. Whatever's problematic about Dr. West has to do with his affinity via proximity to ruling class via Ivy League status. RFK Jr. is not a proximity to oligarchy. He's a loyal member. Holistic Radical. That name speaks to the comment you made. That was a holistic sort of radical comment. Info for Case and Hector. Oh, I read that from Roger. Buster Peak again. Maybe socialist third party runs will move West to the left. That's a good point. Because up until now, Cornel West was the most left in the race, regardless of the party. But now we have a socialist saying we need to dismantle capitalism now. So she's further left than Cornel. So maybe her name is Claudia de la Cruz, will push or move or pull Cornel left. Whatever disappointments I may or may not have, I'd still vote for West. Post-duopoly solidarity. Sorry, my name is so wordy. Chant of the Moldalia. Motherfucker or MFers act like they forgot about MK Ultra COINTELPRO. Yes, like you forgot that's what's about to happen. I read this earlier, but I'll read Sabby's again. FYI, DNC has already changed the rules in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Georgia. RFK and Marianne need at least 80% to get delegates. Otherwise, their delegates go to Joe Biden. And that's the DNC made that. Thank you, Sabby, for the super chat and the knowledge and the information. which one addresses material needs of the people in this country and has concrete agenda with specific policies without paying fealty to the framing of elitists? I would say with that sort of hurdle, nobody. And that's from Sean. Thank you for that, Sean. Thank you, Roger, for all your super chats. I don't know if I read this one. Can you put their names below the face? I was trying to figure out how to adjust that, and I couldn't figure that out. I did see that earlier, and I was trying to figure it out. I'm not good with computer and technology, so I just kind of keep it set. I wasn't able, when I hit the settings, I wasn't able to find which setting to change that. So hopefully I'll get some help. Here's another one from Sean. Right left is a false perception of reality given to us by the ruling class. It changes their convenience to push an agenda that never changes. That is a great analysis of that. And Biden 71, another super sticker. Thank you again, as always. And then Eric House is in the house. Kyle and his mom make me want to barf. And that was the first one. I do see I got another one after I read the last one. Here goes one. DC, racist bot trolls ain't nothing new. Not JD's fault. Yes, and in racist being in Jimmy Dore's chat is not, in my opinion, a reflection on Jimmy. Like, that doesn't say anything to me about Jimmy. So I hope nobody took it that way. That's just specifically saying Sabby said she saw some racist people in the chat. That's it. That doesn't mean anything beyond that. All right. So thank you for the 24 super chats we got today. It was a very productive conversation. I'm going to leave you with this little bit of conversation that they're having about Joe Biden accomplishments. And my question is, why is it a thing? And the reason I only covered 6 minutes of this interview, because we're going to cover the full interview, most likely the post-duopoly show on Monday or in one of my other shows that we're going to do. But why is it a thing? Why is it a thing that we have to give credit to Joe Biden? Let's say Joe Biden is giving everybody $1 million. Why is that a thing that leftists must now check off the box of giving Joe Biden credit? That's what I would have to say to what Kyle and what Kyle's especially kind of goes hard at this idea. Why can't you give him credit? Why can't you acknowledge it? Why is that a thing that we must acknowledge, that the corrupt racist, demented person does something marginally good? Why is that a thing? Would be my question in my analysis when we do the full analysis of this video. And I'm going to leave you with it. Here it goes.
Actually, this person is significantly better. And I would say that Biden, for my disappointments with him, for all of the things that I talk about plenty, including disappointments on student loan debt, including on the pandemic relief that I talked about, including on the railways, all these things, right? Ukraine. At what point, though, do you acknowledge that this person is a lot better than Donald Trump? And so when you're in this binary choice where let's not pretend like Cornel West is going to be president of the United States, it is worth making the choice in that situation to reelect Joe Biden and get the NLRB and get the antitrust stuff and get what is at hand to be gotten in this moment and live to fight another day.
So for one, Crystal, somebody might say, and people did make this exact argument against Bernie Sanders. Fine, he's on the stage, but I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to weaken the person who's ultimately obviously going to be the president of the United States. Why not vote for Biden in the primaries? Why? And you're wrinkling your brow because it's a ridiculous argument. I completely agree. I don't see the argument for Marianne and against Cornel West. They have nothing to do with each other. You can vote for Marianne in a primary. You can be happy that she's on the debate stage, which obviously they aren't allowing, which is material to this argument, I've got to say. Some people you're saying, what is the Green Party going to do? The Democratic Party has demonstrated that it won't host a free and fair and open primary.
Wait, I get that. But how does Cornel West getting 5% of the vote and helping unintentionally to reelect Trump, how does that move us towards our goals?
So two things. One, you said this in the now viral clip, that just framing Cornel West as the spoiler, looking at those polls. In those polls that you referenced, Biden is losing in both of them, with or without Cornel West in the race. Now,
Cornel West makes it worse.
Cornel West makes it incrementally worse.
I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not blaming people or saying like it's their fault for Trump getting reelected or whatever. But I am saying we would like it if the way the Democratic Party responded to Cornel West would be to cancel all the student loan. But we know that's not reality.
And so let's get
we know that what ought to happen and the reality of what will happen are two very different things.
Let's get to the second point.
Yeah.
You framed the 2016 votes for Jill Stein and the reaction of the Democratic Party subsequently as evidence that a concerted movement effort to withhold one's votes has been proven ineffective. It is obviously the case, Crystal, that there was not a concerted effort in 2016 or any kind of structural movement to withhold one's vote for Hillary Clinton in favor of Jill Stein. It was just a bunch of us angry Bernie bros, a very small number, by the way, because we all know sitting here that more Bernie Sanders voters in 2016 bent the knee and voted for Hillary Clinton than Hillary Clinton voters in 2008 bent the knee and voted for Barack Obama. We all know these statistics. We've been saying them back at neoliberals for the last 5, 6, whatever years. That being said, there was no argument to control the media narrative and present an opportunity for actual leverage and change. So there wasn't like a group, there was no spokesperson, there was no politician, there was no left media that was saying, here, I have a organized movement, an organized group of people who are willing to actually change their mind and vote for the Democratic nominee in exchange for various concessions. That didn't exist. And I'm, by the way, not advocating for it. I know that some of my friends like Nathan Robinson have said that Cornel West should do exactly that, say that he'd be willing to drop out in exchange for various concessions. I think that's better than nothing. I think that's more than, frankly, I love Marianne and I hope she's successful, but that's more than Marianne is likely to get out of this. However, that is not even my plan, my perspective.
Yeah.
What I am saying, though, is that knowing that the Democratic Party is fundamentally not willing to be fair. They're willing to rig the election. They're willing to change the order of the states. They are willing to completely block Marianne out of the media. It feels rich to say that running within the Democratic Party is manifestly and demonstrably more effective in actually changing the outcomes
because of the structural barriers, Brie,
than Cornel West, who at very least, you keep being very dismissive, Kyle, about this 5% matching
first of all, I've said like 2 words in the past 10 minutes, okay? So I'm not being dismissive about anything. I haven't gotten a fucking word in.
Okay. What is it that you're chomping at the bit to say,
It's the structural barriers against running as a third party, as rigged as it is by the DNC against outsider Democrats, which it definitely is. It's even more rigged against third parties, which is why they always get like 3% of the vote.
Which is literally why
Bernie got 43% of the vote.
Which is literally why people feel it is a structural advantage to get someone like Cornel West to 5% of the vote so they can get federal matching funds. To me, as a voter,
40% as a Democrat.
For me, as a voter in New York, I'm not interested in shoring up the Democratic Party.
No, that's him getting his ideas out. It's shoring up Cornel West. That's the whole point.
I am not a Democrat.
I understand that. That's very clear. But I'm saying that would shore up Cornel West.
And the people who also don't want to vote for Joe Biden under any circumstances are not Democrats. And fundamentally, you can make your argument. I think it's a perfectly legitimate argument to make to Democrats. I think that Democrats might think that Joe Biden is a manifestly better Democrat than other Democrats.
But it's not about whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's about what are your political goals. And I think that 100%. We share a lot of the same political goals.
There's a big one that we don't share.
But hold on. So I still don't understand.